yeah. Yeah, I got it. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I wanna see you tonight. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I got it. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Tonight is the night. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Tonight is the night.
I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati.
Dooby-dooby-doo. What's going on, guys? Happy Friday. Welcome to Sabby Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you're new, I want to let you know that Sabby Sabs podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. On Thursdays, you can catch me there for the Sabby and JB show. And I'm laughing because there was a really interesting conversation on RBN just a couple hours ago. And you can catch me here on Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and every other Sunday. Shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rockfin, Twitter, and Rumble. And what is going on, guys? First and foremost, if you haven't had a chance to do so, when you get the opportunity, please go over to Revolutionary Blackout Network and watch the conversation that just finished like an hour ago with my comrades at RBN and Chuck D from Public Enemy. That was an interesting conversation. It got a little heated. But very interesting. So make sure that you check that out when you get the opportunity to do so. That was something else. I got to tell you, something else, guys. But it is Friday. I hope you guys are excited and ready for the weekend. I know I am. Got big news coming around the corner, and I'll tell you guys about what's happening next week after I give out shout outs to people in the chat. Greetings, MHD, Kamala, Biden in a conference. Oh, God. I see the game over emoji there. Yeah, interesting moment, huh? Shout out to Lawrence Johnson says, free Palestine. Greetings, Bruce. Oh, sorry, my mouse got stuck. What's going on, Bruce? I will sit and watch this mess marinate. I am tired and fresh out of sympathy. Watch the mess marinate. Yeah. Greetings, Eartha. I've been emailing legislators not to replace Biden with Harris. The party is doomed. Interesting. Don't forget to answer that poll, ladies and gentlemen. Do you think that Kamala Harris should replace Joe Biden? There's also an option there for those of you that are voting third party. They're like, screw both of them. And I think there's also an option that says, girl, I have no idea. Greetings, Aniha says, I hope you do a review of Zelensky's interview 7 days ago on Bloomberg TV. He is the worst liar. I'll have to check that out. I missed that one. Doesn't surprise me, though. Greetings, Miguel says, peace. Happy Friday. Shout out to Larez. Sup, Sabby, Eric, Corey, and RBN fam. I'm voting third party. It doesn't matter what decrepit carcass the Dems wheel out. that person will be establishment. Biden is gone. Donors are out. Smash the like, y'all. That's right. Hit that like button, guys. Greetings, lose. Third party all the way. I'm looking at Jill Stein, Claudia De La Cruz, and Sonsky, American Solidarity Party, leaning toward the former. But a lot can happen between now and November. That is true. You're right about that. Greetings, TD says, hi, everyone. Shout out to Hannah G says, third party. Interesting. Greetings, Anna says, I'll be watching the third party debate at 8 p.m. ET after debate. I will come back and watch Jill Stein 2024. That's right. The freedom debate is happening as well. I'll be talking about that on Sunday because I'll have time to watch it. Greetings, Red 6 says, hello, Sabby. Hello. Is it me you're looking for? Greetings to my comrade JB says, hello, everyone. Everyone, really fight the power. Forward kisses to all. JB was on that panel discussion with Chuck D, so it was really interesting. Shout out to Nikki's World says, hello, everyone. Greetings, Rick, says, hey, Lawrence. Shout out to Rachel says, hello, all. Greetings, Victor. Ayo, I'm right on time. Shout out to Dwayne says, howdy, y'all. Greetings, Ellen. I think it's Ellen or LRN. Jill Stein 2024, no to NATO, no to war. Greetings, Teddy. Go ahead and sub Kamala. She is more unpopular than Biden and thus would be defeated even worse. Nobody can accuse Dems of being menses. Shout out to Layers of the Snark. Hey, Sabby, your poll is hilarious. I tried to throw a little bit of humor in there. Shout out to Jasmine says, hello. Greetings, Borikina. Not only was this press conference staged, but he was being told what to say. Even with all this help, he could still stop messing up his responses. Yeah, it's obvious they're helping him out there. Greetings, Ina says, Kyle? Hello from Euskara? Euskara? The indigenous language of Basque. Welcome. Hello. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Greetings, Sulamoon says, greetings, comrades. Shout out to Renee. Good evening from Denmark. Hello, everyone. Time for some new, younger political person to lead the American empire before it collapses from within. That is interesting. Hello and welcome, Denmark in the house. Shout out to Cassandra. I love Sabby's doobie doo. Oh, she said it. I didn't say it. Oh, man. Shout out to Rose says, hey, folks, how's it going? How is it going, Rose? Greetings, Randy says, good evening, all my Sabby comrades. Shout out to Rachel says, third party versus everybody else. Ooh, that's an interesting way of putting it. Shout out to Ravina says, it was eye-opening for sure. Faux show. Shout out to Jesse Smith says, hey, hey. Greetings, Peter. Things on RBN got heated. Whatever. Oh, no, it did towards the end there. It did. Shout out to Bryce. What up, Sabby? Sup, everyone? I hope everyone is enjoying their evening. If you haven't seen the interview with Chuck D, worth a watch. Yes. Yes. Chuck was trying to filibuster for real. Greetings, Eric. My producer says, hey, hi, yo, all Friday peeps. Greetings, Kill Your Gorgie says, happy Friday, comrades. Shout out to Alex Ventura. Sabby, you need to read Anthony Sutton's book, Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution. That's another one I'll have to add to my list, Alex. I almost called you Anthony. There's another one I have to add to my list. You guys have given me a long list of books to read. Shout out to Bubbly says, hi, Sabby, Team Pisces. Pisces unite. We're Pisces. We're friendly and sweet and nice and kind. Just don't piss us off. We can be kind of moody. Greetings, Marvin says, and Killery, a Kakla and Killery 2024. Oh my God, that would be crazy, 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 crazy. All right, guys, let's go ahead and give a shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. Thank you guys so much for your support. I really do appreciate you around here in this house. If you're interested in being a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories: Ultimate, Sabinators. There's also Sabsters doing the damn thing. We also have Sabbies. Sabbies is the most popular tier. A lot of people sign up to be a Sabby. And of course, members. Thank you guys so much. You can see all of their names here, and you can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen there on the ticker. And I want to give a shout out to new Sabby patrons. Over here, we call them newbies. Let's give it up to Justin Figueroa. Dun, dun, dun. Thank you. Thank you. Awesome. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, what are we discussing tonight? Let's go ahead and share that thumbnail. We have some interesting stories. Yes, of course, you know, we're going to discuss that Biden conference from yesterday. Tonight, we're discussing Democrats test Kamala Harris. This is something that is happening privately behind the scenes, or it was private. Now it's not. We're going to get into that. That has to do with the poll that's attached to the live chat. We're also going to discuss Biden's Cringe press conference. Geez Louise. And it's interesting. In that picture, you see Biden's kind of looking at Kamala there like, you want my spot, kid? You want my spot? Well, you're not going to get it. You're not getting my spot, Kamala. We'll get into that conference. And we're also going to discuss the reaction to that, what people are saying after that, and what does that mean for the Biden campaign. We're also going to discuss Cenk Uygur debates Biden donor. I can't even believe the donor agreed to have this debate, but he did. They're really, really trying. They're desperate guys. They're really trying to help Biden here. So there you go. And I don't know if you heard about this story, but AOC tries to impeach Supreme Court justices Alito and, of course, Clarence Thomas. We're going to get into that, and I'm going to explain to you how that is connected, or I feel is connected to one of the rulings that was passed by the Supreme Court recently that I covered. We're also going to cover those Wisconsin ballot measure results from 2023. That is our last state to cover for 2023. When I get back after next week, we will start diving into 2024. So get ready for that. If you're in a BI state, obviously I will be covering it. I'm also going to do shorts for each of these as well. And the short is just going to list all of the initiatives for each state. And then there will be a link to basically point people to the details if they want to watch the full video. So I wanted to do a short version of that too, because sometimes people don't have all that time. And they just want to know, like, what are the measures? And that's it. So going to do it a little bit differently this year. Let's get that comment on Rumble, Eric. It's the Rumble rant. Thank you. Thank you for the $5, Marks Pugsley. Hey, Sabby, isn't current F up of the Dems a textbook case of fuck around and find out? I'm with Kit. Cook up a steak to celebrate when they lose. Yeah. And you know what? We're going to dive into that a little bit tonight, too, because this is the Democratic Party's fault. Thank you for that tip on Rockfin, Dave. Thank you to Sabs for keeping it live with the left hosting, doing it, trying to do the damn thing. Thank you for the super chat with Our Eyes Rise. Fight the power. THA, the power, not Chuck D. Thank you so much for that. All right, let's get started. If you haven't had a chance to do so, folks, go ahead and smash that like button. Start us off right. If you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share. Yeah. Based. All right. And let's go ahead and get started with our first story tonight. So a couple of weeks ago, I covered a story about the Supreme Court passing a ruling about bribes. And I told you during that coverage that, of course, they're going to pass this because some of them are also taking bribes. So let's go back and let's reflect on that ruling, and then we'll get into the impeachment that's been filed by AOC. Let's go ahead and get into this. The U.S. Supreme Court just basically legalized bribery. Remember we talked about this? So here are all the justices. Dashing, aren't they? Corrupt, corrupt, corrupt. Did you know you could give your local government officials tips when they do things you like? Brett Kavanaugh thinks you can. In fact, if you're rich enough, says the Supreme Court, you can now pay off state and local officials for government acts that fit your policy preference or advance your interests. You can give them lavish gifts. Hold on to the word gifts. Send them on vacations or simply cut them checks. You can do all of this so long as the cash, gifts, or other gratuities are provided after the service and not before it. And so long as plausible deniability of the meaning and intent of those gratuities is maintained. So that was the ruling that was passed by the Supreme Court a couple of weeks ago. And you'll notice here it was a 6-3 opinion that was issued. So I just wanted to highlight that once again as we go into this story about Clarence Thomas and Justice Alito and the articles of impeachment that have been filed against them. Now, I want to remind you first what happened with Clarence Thomas, just in case people may have forgotten. Last year, Clarence Thomas was called out for just this, for bribes. The Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, corruption is intolerable. Here's what we can do about it. This was from the LA Times, and this was August 10th of 2023. So this really wasn't that long ago. It's not even almost a year, but not quite. If you thought you could no longer be shocked by the lavish gifts conservative billionaires have reportedly bestowed on Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, Thursday's remarkable investigative report from ProPublica might surprise you. It reveals even more of the depth of Thomas' corruption. The report exposes Thomas had a pattern of secretly accepting private flights, yacht trips, and other luxuries from a cadre of super wealthy conservative donors over 3 decades in violation of legal and ethical standards. None of these donors knew Thomas before he joined the court. So, to that point, these are people that he met after he was already a Supreme Court justice. So by him accepting these gifts, obviously that makes him compromise. That also makes him corrupt. And this is what we've been saying before, that a lot of these officials are corrupt. I'm willing to bet that if you were to point out the politicians that are in Congress, federal judges, justices all across the country, I wouldn't be surprised if only a handful of them are actually not corrupt. I think a lot of these people have been bought, they've been paid for, and they are serving certain people. That's the donor class. So this shows you again, it's not just linked to politicians. These undisclosed gifts represent intolerable corruption within the highest court in the land. ProPublica reported that these wealthy benefactors have treated the justice to at least 38 vacations, including a previously unknown yacht trip around the Bahamas, 26 flights on private jets, helicopter rides, box seats at sporting events, and stays at luxury resorts. Now, here's the crazy part, folks. Supreme Court justices make a pretty good salary, more than many of you will ever make. Clarence Thomas can afford to buy box seats. Just is what it is. He'd probably get a discount just because he is SCOTUS. So these were the things that he accepted. Clarence Thomas can pay for his own vacations. Now, the private jets and all that stuff, do you really have to go on a private jet? Greed, corruption. This is where we're at. It goes on a little bit more to say, Thomas' misuse of his lofty position to enrich himself and live a life of luxury is just the kind of thing that has eroded the public's confidence in a crucial institution. The Supreme Court's perceived legitimacy has dropped to an all-time low. So, I would argue I didn't think a lot of these people were legitimate to begin with. That's just my take. You guys can let me know how you feel. Like I said, I would be surprised if you could find at least a handful of them around the country that are not corrupt, that have not accepted some type of bribe or gift. I would not be surprised. It goes on to say here, Thomas appears to have violated the law by failing to disclose these gifts, according to ethics experts. So why is that important? That was reported last year. And now fast forward to today, because now AOC has filed articles of impeachment against Clarence Thomas and Justice Alito. Let's go ahead and get into this clip here. Listen to this.
In the meantime here, we do want to get and stay on Capitol Hill there at Live Now Look back again in Washington. You're going to hear from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in just a moment here. Of course, the Democrat from New York, the Congresswoman, issuing and introducing today articles of impeachment against Supreme Court Justices Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito. In her statement, she says the unchecked corruption crisis on the Supreme Court has now spiraled into a constitutional crisis threatening American democracy writ large. She says this: Justices Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito's pattern of refusal to recuse from consequential matters before the court, in which they hold widely documented financial and personal entanglements, constitutes a grave threat to American rule of law, the integrity of our democracy, and one of the clearest cases for which the tool of impeachment was designed. So this is quite interesting.
Pause there for just a second. Danny is spot on, and this is what I was going to bring up. Partisan shenanigans by Sandy. Yeah, because the reality is, here's the problem that I have with impeachment. I'm not against impeachment, but what I have noticed over, let's say, past 20 years, it seems like impeachment is being used in a partisan way. When we look back to Bill Clinton, for example, Bill Clinton was impeached. Now, impeached doesn't mean you're removed from office, but he was impeached. That was a partisan effort that was led by Republicans, right? Now, granted, some of the Democrats, once they heard the story, once they heard about his affair there with intern Monica Lewinsky, some of them were like, okay, yeah, maybe this needs to be heard, as well. But it was initiated by the Republican Party. When Donald Trump was president, Democrats filed articles of impeachment or tried to impeach Donald Trump. That was a partisan thing. AOC trying to impeach Clarence Thomas and Justice Alito. This is a partisan thing. And then not only that, remember the story that I just told you about Clarence Thomas, that was reported in August of last year. Why weren't those articles filed last year? Because last year was not an election year. So don't forget, AOC is up for re-election. This is something that she can put under her belt and say, look at me, I filed, for impeachment against these two justices. And of course, they happen to be conservative justices. So my problem is, again, I have no problem with impeachment, but I've seen the way that it's been used over the past 20 so years, and it's been done in a partisan way. So ask yourself that question. If it were not election season, and if it were Democrat justices that were accused of doing these acts, would AOC file those articles of impeachment? Think about that.
Interesting here. I consider myself somewhat of a student of history. I am not entirely familiar with any precedent that there might be for such a move as this. A member of Congress, the Democrat there from New York, the Congresswoman, introducing articles of impeachment against two sitting Supreme Court justices here. Well, I'll stop talking. You can hear from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez herself on why she feels the need to do this and whether or not it can go anywhere. Here's AOC.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to introduce articles of impeachment against Associate Justices of the Supreme Court, Clarence Thomas and Samuel Anthony Alito, Jr. Against Justice Thomas, the resolution includes 3 total articles. 1 count of failure to disclose financial income, gifts, reimbursements, property interest liabilities, and transactions, among other information. And 2 counts of refusal to recuse from matters concerning his spouse's legal and financial interests before the court. The second resolution includes the following impeachment articles against Justice Alito. one count of refusal to recuse from cases in which he had a personal bias or prejudice concerning a party before the court, and one count of failure to disclose financial incomes, gifts, reimbursements, property interests, among other information. Mr. Speaker, nomination and appointment to the Supreme Court is one of the highest privileges and most consequential responsibilities of our nation. Such an appointment is uniquely insulated in its power. Confirmation to the court is a lifetime appointment whereby justices are entrusted with decisions that powerfully shape the nation as well as the lives of every American. For this reason and others, the Constitution rightfully and explicitly holds justices to even higher standards than members of Congress or even the President. Section 1 of Article 3 of the Constitution commands federal justices to hold their offices during good behavior, in addition to its clauses barring treason, bribery, and other high crimes and misdemeanors. And Congress has exercised its power to reinforce this higher standard of the judiciary before.
Now, let me pause here for a second. Don't you think it's a little too convenient that it happens to be her that filed for these articles of impeachment? Because anybody could have done this. This is AOC making a political career move. There's a reason why I waited to cover this story today, and I covered the story about DSA withdrawing their endorsement for her first. Because this story received so much national attention, I felt like it was overshadowing the fact that the organization that she's a part of withdrew their endorsement for her. So it was important for me that I covered the DSA story first before I covered this one. But this is a political career move for AOC. This is a way for her, again, to really make her name in DC. And I said this before. We all, I think a lot of us that supported Bernie and the squad, after that first year or so when they were in Congress, we started complaining a little bit whoa, what's going on? When AOC first came to Congress, she was very combative. She was protesting in Nancy Pelosi's office and all that kind of stuff. And then apparently somebody must have pulled her aside and gave her a talking to, because next thing we knew, she started falling in line and calling Nancy Pelosi Mama Bear. So she realized that she did want to be a career politician, regardless of what she said when she was running for office, when she said that she would fine being a one-term congressperson. That was a lie. So how do you make your name in DC? You make your name by doing things like this. There are a lot of people in Congress. Most of them you've probably never heard of. I know I haven't heard of most of them. But have you ever noticed how there are certain names that you hear over and over? There are certain congressmen and women that you see on corporate media over and over and over. And then the other ones you never hear from. These are the people that have kind of been chosen. They've been selected to lead the way in Congress. So for AOC not to be the Speaker of the House or the minority leader of the House, and she's definitely obviously not a senator, don't you think it's a little bit strange how she gets so much attention? She's not the only squad member. She has been tapped to become the next Nancy Pelosi. And I predicted this 2 years ago when I saw the way that she was moving, when she tried to both sides. I'm going to be a little bit progressive now and not all the way progressive, because I still want to get along with Democrat establishment. So when she came into Congress, we all have to remember that was during Trump's presidential term. So if you are a self-described Democratic socialist and you are entering Congress during Trump's year and he's a Republican, it's easier for you to be combative when the leader in the White House is a Republican. Fast forward to Joe Biden taking the White House, and you notice how she fell back. She was not as heavily critical towards Joe Biden, even though there were a number of times that I called out on this show where Joe Biden was completely in the wrong. And AOC was not willing to call it out. She would run away from reporters. She would run away from protesters. And then finally, she got to the point where I support Joe Biden unconditionally. He's the nominee regardless. So she kept revealing herself over time, and then finally it's just masked completely off, right? So this is her playing partisan politics. One of the ways to move up in the DC ladder, particularly in Congress, is by doing partisan stuff like this. This is not to say that Clarence Thomas and Justice Alito are not guilty. I think those mofos are. Let's just keep it real. But again, notice who was the one to bring forward these articles of impeachment. It was her. This is another way for her to move up in Congress. So do I think that AOC really cares desperately about what Clarence Thomas and Justice Alito did? Not really. I think she took this as an opportunity to make a name for herself and advance her political career. Whether you like her or not, you have to see what she's doing. AOC is not stupid. She's actually very smart. Let's go on.
This body has impeached and removed 8 federal judges for transgressions ranging from evading income tax and perjury to intoxication on the bench and abandoning the office to join the Confederacy. Perhaps most critical to the legitimacy of the institution, these judicial standards require justices to recuse themselves in any proceeding where their impartiality might reasonably be questioned. In other words, if a person could reasonably believe that the legitimacy of a justice's judgment could be or be perceived to be compromised due to their personal involvement in the case or its parties, the standard is clear. The justice must recuse.
Now, here's the problem that she may run into. The ruling that was just passed by the Supreme Court, that it is okay for public and state officials to take bribes. And I wonder if they'll be willing to use that to defend themselves. And don't get me wrong, Clarence Thomas is trash. Justice Alito is trash. I think they're absolutely awful. Now, I can't comment too much about Justice Alito and how he was appointed, but I do remember how Clarence Thomas was appointed. And I point to this because if you're going to come at Clarence Thomas, if you think he shouldn't be in the seat, I think it's only fair to call out the reason why he's there in the first damn place. When Anita Hill testified against Clarence Thomas, Joe Biden was the chairman of that committee that she testified in front of. Go back and watch the video footage. Joe Biden was the senator that refused to let Anita Hill's witnesses testify. If people would have been able to hear her witnesses testify, I don't think that Clarence Thomas would be sitting there right now. So people have Joe Biden to thank for that. A lot of people forget this. I didn't. So how can you sit there at this hearing and you have evidence? Anita Hill had evidence against Clarence Thomas, and you have witnesses that are ready to testify. And all it took was for Joe Biden to shut it down. These are things people cannot forget. And that's how Clarence Thomas got that seat. So Joe Biden let this corrupt Clarence Thomas walk right into the Supreme Court, a lifetime appointment. Let's go on a little bit more.
They are required to recuse. That stringent and sacred standard exists for the good of the ruling, the judiciary, and the country. Mr. Speaker, I believe that everyday Americans, independent of party or ideology, can reasonably conclude that Justices Thomas and Alito's years-long pattern of misconduct and failure to recuse in cases bearing their clear personal and financial involvement represents an abuse of power and threat to our democracy fundamentally incompatible with continued service on our nation's highest court.
The same can be, thank you for that, Bryce. Expect this appointment or this impeachment to be shut down too. Thank you so much for that. The same can be said for Nancy Pelosi The same can be said for Joe Biden. If we're talking about corruption, I mean, I don't know how many times we have to bring this up, but why is it okay for Nancy Pelosi to trade stocks? You can add Ro Khanna to that list too, even though he continues to tell people on Twitter, those are my wife's stocks. So you see how it's partisan? AOC would never bring forth these types of, this type of pressure towards Nancy Pelosi or towards Joe Biden or towards Ro Khanna because they're on her team. This is the problem with partisan politics. Did you know that the founders of this country did not want political parties? You know why they didn't want political parties? Because they knew something like this would happen. Because under political parties, the needs of the parties are put before the people. So this is why people end up backing their party even when they're in the wrong. So that's what I want you to ask yourself as you're listening to this speech from AOC. Would she have done this to Joe Biden? Talk about the business dealings between Joe Biden and Hunter Biden with Burisma in Ukraine. There's this miles long paper for that. If I remember correctly, there were House representatives on the Republican side that wanted to impeach Joe Biden over that. AOC spoke out against it and said, no, because he's on her team. Partisan politics every damn time.
For the good of the institution and the nation, absent resignation, they must be removed. The proof is undeniable, and here I will lay it out. Justice Clarence Thomas, for decades now, has carried on a close, financially entangled personal relationship with real estate billionaire Harlan Crow. It is of material importance to the American people to note that Justice Thomas's relationship to the billionaire only began after Thomas's powerful appointment to our nation's highest court. The cash, goods, and services Justice Thomas received over the years include large loan balance cancellations, tuition payments for family, and vacations in private jets and yachts worth up to $500,000 alone.
And the thing that drives me crazy about this with Clarence Thomas and his dumbass is that these are things he could have paid for on his own. That's the thing that kills me. These are things he could have paid for on his own. These are the bribes that you took. God damn. If you're going to take a bribe, Clarence, we'll give you this vacation. Come on out to the Bahamas. You can come hang out with me there. By the way, you can fly on a private jet. That's the bribe you took, son. These are things he could have paid for on his own. Power and money.
In total, Justice Thomas appears to have received more than $1.5 million worth in goods, cash equivalents, and services from Mr. Crow. And that is just what we know of. But truthfully, we won't ever really know the total sum of contributions Thomas received from Crow. Justice Thomas not only accepted these contributions while Mr. Crow had business in front of the court, but he accepted them in secret, failing for years and years to report them. Yet Thomas did report smaller gifts during this time, demonstrating a clear understanding of his legal obligation to report. Would a reasonable American question that receiving lavish gifts from Mr. Crow might lead Justice Thomas to have a bias towards his, quote, friend with business before the court? Without a doubt, yes. But did Justice Thomas recuse? No. Now take Justice Samuel Alito, who has no shortage of billionaire associates of his own. After billionaire Paul Singer gave Justice Alito a luxury fishing trip on a private jet, a contribution that was also hidden from the public and the court, Justice Alito not only refused to recuse, but changed his mind regarding his gracious host's case.
What's interesting about this part of the conversation is when she mentions billionaire associates, all of you guys have billionaire associates. All of you have billionaire associates, man. All of the parties are owned by billionaires. Are you kidding me? That's the funny part.
Just a short time after accepting the lavish undisclosed trip from Singer, Alito joined the court in reversing its previous position and took up Singer's case. He did not recuse. Justice Alito also refused to recuse in the case itself, ultimately leading to a ruling that netted Singer $2.4 billion. And that ruling did not just enrich Singer. It also structurally tilted the playing field further away from working people and towards the vulture funds, siphoning money and resources away from the communities that need them most. Could a reasonable American question whether or not Justice Alito could have acted impartially in this case, given his personal relationship with Singer? Absolutely. In January 2021, after the former president of the United States incited an insurrection on the Capitol in this chamber to interfere with the results of the U.S. election, Justice Samuel Alito and his wife flew an upside-down American flag, a symbol of solidarity with the attack, outside their home. 2 years later, they publicly displayed outside their home yet another incendiary symbol, a flag associated with extreme right-wing Christian nationalism.
So now people are responsible for what they do outside of their home. So this brings up another issue, you know, like I don't agree with that, what he did, but this brings up another issue. How far does this go? And what you do on your property, is that grounds for impeachment? When people bring up the Bill Clinton impeachment, I think the difference is that he was screwing an intern at the White House. At the White House. But are they responsible for what they do at their own home? Because he flew an upside down flag? Is he responsible for that? There's something we need to start thinking about, guys.
Justice Alito maintains that his wife, Martha Ann Alito, is the only one responsible for the flags. But common sense maintains that such a close and incendiary revelation requires recusal by the justice from January 6th related cases. Despite the overwhelming appearance of a conflict of interest, Justice Alito refused to recuse himself from cases surrounding the 2020 election and questions of the former president's legal immunity in the attack.
Of course, he's not going to recuse himself. It's all partisan. This is what I said before. Even the Supreme Court, it's partisan. When we have a Republican president, they appoint conservative justices. When we have a Democrat, president, they appoint Democrat justices. So it would be nice to have a Supreme Court that didn't have lifetime appointments. Number one, I don't agree with the lifetime appointments. I never got a lifetime appointment in any job I had. At will employment only. Okay. That's what the state law says. But I don't agree with that. And it would be nice if we had a Supreme Court that was not partisan. That would be nice. And see how justices would rule then.
Would a reasonable person question that Justice Alito's conduct exhibits and demonstrates reasonable concern for bias in these cases? Absolutely, and without question. And finally, Justice Thomas, who is married to Virginia Thomas, a financially and personally involved operative in the Stop the Steal movement and Capitol attack, also joined opinions in these cases, even as clear evidence mounted that not only was his wife fully committed to overthrowing the results of a fair election, but she was actively lobbying members of the Trump administration attempting to do just that.
So it sounds like to me the solution to all of this is to remove corporate money. Remove corporate money from electoral politics. Remove it from the courts. To me, that is the solution. You have to get the corporate money out. I mean, again, SCOTUS just said it's okay to take bribes. You have politicians, AOC's talking about lobbying. How many of the politicians are avoiding lobbyists? Most of them are bought and paid for. How many of your congressmen and women have grassroots campaigns? Most of them don't. So the way that you fix this all across the board is you remove the corporate money from these institutions. And until that changes, we're always going to have corrupt politicians, and we're always going to have corrupt judges and justices. And this is not new. Even if you look on the local level, you have judges that have been bought off. People that have money, rich people, they have made it so in certain instances where they will get a certain judge so that they will not be held accountable in court. When you're rich, you can pay for the judge that you want. So you have to get the money out. Until then, you'll always have corruption. So AOC has filed articles of impeachment against Clarence Thomas and Alito, and we will see where this goes. Again, I don't think these mofos are innocent. I think they're guilty as hell. But I think that this is a political move by AOC to enrich herself in her career and to move up in that DNC, the DNC bubble ladder. That's what she's trying to do, move up in the ranks of the party. Because like I said, where's that same type of energy towards Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi, and Ro Khanna for their behavior? Where's that energy? Where was that same energy from AOC when Tara Reade reached out to her and said, listen, this happened to me. Please don't support Joe Biden. Did AOC even give Tara Reade the time of day, misbelieve women? No, she did not give her the time of day because it was her party. And there were a number of people that Tara Reade reached out to, by the way, that ignored it because it was a Democrat. And that's one of the problems that I have with partisan politics. Are we going to be fair, or are we only going to do what works for the party that we belong to? We'll have to wait and see. She definitely could have filed those articles last year when it was reported, but she waited until it was election year, and she's up for re-election. Pay attention, folks. Let's get to some of the comments here. Shout out to KD. Thank you for becoming a Sabby YouTube member. Thank you, Roger. Thank you so much for the super chat. Sab, Virginia Governor Bob MCD SCOTUS decision in 2016 was first. I don't know what you mean by all that, but I think I kind of got it. Shout out to Jasmine Harrell, who's been a member for 7 months. AOC is so performative. The Supreme Court allows a construction company to sue a union over their striking workers, and she didn't try to impeach them then. Right? Thank you for the super chat with Our Eyes Rise. Will you look at Fight the Power, read the petition for reparations, and provide feedback? One of your videos is on the site. It's Black Force Reparations. Oh, wow. I'll have to check that out. I didn't know one of my videos is on the site. I'll check that out. Fight the Power. I'll check it. That's interesting. This is new to me. Thank you for this one as well. The site name is Fight the Power. Okay, I'm going to check this out. This is interesting. Thank you, Marvin. Crucial institution who has turned into prostitution. Thank you for Cynical. Cynical has been a member for 2 months. Those sitting in positions of power live beyond their means and then tell hardworking citizens to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. The hypocrisy. Jenna says, call me when she rings up Pelosi, a freaking coward. Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Janice. She wasn't protesting. She was walking past and stopped to use the Sunshine Movement's protest as a photo op. You must be talking about the Nancy Pelosi incident. Thank you for that. JB says AOC is a day late and $1 short. This should have been done when that ProPublica article came out last year. Yep. Marvin, Sabby, people love free shit. Here, take the pen and get me my approval. You know what's funny about that? Like when I was in undergrad, my freshman year, they love to give freshmen free supplies. Like on campus, it was like, you know, especially the credit card companies. They used to say, sign up for a credit card with Visa and you get a free t-shirt. And I don't know what it was about free t-shirts during freshman year, but like we were all about some free t-shirts. That's a good point. Thank you for the super chat, P. Smith. I learned so much from you. Much gratitude. Thank you so much. That is sweet. Thank you, baby Ethernet. It's AOC's big break towards becoming Pelosi 2.0. Yes, sir. And Mouse SF says, baby bear is all grown up. There you go. Let's take the comment on Rockfin, Eric. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. Sab, when Anita spoke to Senate Judiciary Committee, was she not testifying against Thomas? Here's the video. Yeah, she was testifying against Clarence Thomas. You know what else is crazy about that? When Biden ran for president in 2020, he actually reached out to Anita Hill to apologize, not because he really cared, but just because he could get her approval to run for president. Apparently, from what I understand, she said all's forgiven or something like that. Isn't that crazy? Couldn't have been me. Couldn't have been me. My response would have been, hell's no. Hell's no. All right. Okay. Let's get into our next story. Hold on to your seats, folks. This is a doozy. Believe it or not, apparently behind the scenes, the Democratic Party, the Biden campaign in particular, have been testing out the possibility of Kamala Harris replacing Joe Biden. This was supposed to be private. It was supposed to be secret, but it is no longer secret because the cat has been let out of the bag by MSNBC. I don't know if they were supposed to reveal that or not, but it's out there. Now, I tell you that because more Democrats are coming forward to protest against Joe Biden staying in this race. And there's another one that was announced earlier today. This is Representative Levin is coming forward, and you're going to hear there is now, I think, over 20 Democrats that have decided to reject Joe Biden, continuing to stay in this race now. Let's dive in here and we'll get to Kamala. It'll all make sense.
The head count continues on Capitol Hill, where NBC's Julie Sirkin is standing by. And I understand you have some new reporting, Julie.
Yeah, we do, Chris. Just literally in the last couple of minutes, the statement has not even gone out widely yet, but our team has learned that there is a 19th Democrat from Congress, 18th House Democrat, 19th overall, of course, including Senator Peter Welch. That is Congressman Mike Levin of California that has come out in the last couple of moments to call on the president to exit the race. I am just reading this in real time. He says, like many of you, I was naturally concerned about Biden's performance in the recent debate. Since then, he says he's made his opinions known in the appropriate manner with leadership, with his colleagues. As we learned, of course, Jeffries, the Democratic leader, just relayed some of those concerns to the president in their meeting last night. Levin continues to say here that he has deep respect for the president's 5+ decades of public service, but he believes the time has come for President Biden to pass the torch. He says it is time to move forward with a new leader together. This is somebody who is a frontline Democrat. He is part of the mission of Democrats in trying to retake the House, to try and flip those, to hang on to those seats, rather in California, flipping those seats in New York to try and flip control of the House. So this is really crucial, Chris. And obviously it comes as we've seen a chorus and an avalanche of Democrats expressing their concerns. Again, 19 to come out publicly and say Biden should step out of the race. But there's a lot in the gray area who have been watching the president closely and all of his performances, privately concerned, publicly saying that perhaps Biden could still change his mind, opening that door a little bit, including members of leadership like Speaker Emerita Pelosi. You do have a caucus, including one that, of course, the president has spoken to in recent days that has stood behind the president. That is the Congressional Black Caucus, Chris. The membership there, the leader there, Congressman Horsford, have been very defensive of Biden. But in our new reporting today from my colleagues, there are some cracks even there. They want to see the president more defiant. They want to see him more aggressive. And like many.
And you hear that part? Even the Congressional Black Caucus, there's disagreements there.
Of their colleagues, they also share the mind that they do need to see a clear path to victory for the president that they have not been able to map out yet, Chris. So a lot of moving parts here, and certainly very notable that as the NATO summit concluded after that press conference yesterday as well, we are now up to 5 Democrats since then that have called on President Biden to exit the race here, especially as he is holding calls, Chris, with members of the Hispanic caucus, with members of the Asian Pacific American caucus, other caucuses that we're reporting throughout the day and tomorrow as well, to try and assuage some of those concerns.
So more Democrat politicians are coming forward to ask Joe Biden to step down or pass the torch. Doesn't necessarily say that they want Kamala, but they don't think that he should stay in this race. And you're also going to hear from Cori Bush. Cori Bush made a statement recently at a union event here in St. Louis. And I want you to hear what she said her constituents are saying to her about Joe Biden.
The people of St. Louis are still calling into our office, letting us know what they think, and we're still listening. So we are hearing from the community, but I will say right now, 100% of the phone calls into our office are asking me to ask the president to step out of the race. And so I'm making it clear, if you have an opinion on it, please call our office and let us know.
100% of the phone calls that are calling into her office, this is the St. Louis area, are asking Joe Biden to leave the race. Now, why is that important? Cori Bush lives in a pretty, if I remember correctly, her district it's very blue, but it's also, there's a lot of Black people in her district, and they don't want Joe. So that's not good for Joe Biden at all. Now, then there's more. We get into Kamala. We getting there. There's a little bit more here because apparently something else privately has been happening behind the scenes. And I'm just going to tell you, I told you so, because I hinted on it last night, but now CNN has confirmed it. Obama and Pelosi privately expressed concerns over Biden. There it is. What did I tell you last night? Nancy Pelosi in that interview, she was not willing to say that she supports Biden. AOC did. AOC unconditionally supported Joe Biden and said, stop this nonsense. He is our nominee. Nancy Pelosi said, let's just wait and see what happens. Right? This op-ed that appears out of nowhere from George Clooney, wink, wink. I told you yesterday, I think we all know that's really Barack Obama, and they've made George Clooney the face of it. And now you have this confirmation here that Nancy Pelosi and Barack Obama behind the scenes are not wanting this to continue. Obama and Pelosi have spoken privately about Joe Biden and the future of his 2024 campaign. Both the former president and ex-speaker expressed concerns about how much harder they think it's becoming for the president to beat Donald Trump. Neither is quite sure what to do. So you know what? This is on the Democratic Party, because I seem to remember during the 2020 primary, Joe Biden not being number one in the polls, particularly during the debates. I seem to remember Joe Biden not winning early primary states until he got to South Carolina, because he got that endorsement from Jim Clyburn. And that changed everything. I seem to remember Obama making phone calls to get other candidates to drop out of the race to help Joe Biden. Joe Biden was never a strong candidate. I tried to tell people this from day one. They made him look strong by getting other candidates to withdraw, by that win that he had in South Carolina. And that's how he got that big boost. If those other candidates, if Buttigieg, if Beto, if Amy Klobuchar, if they would have stayed in that race, I don't think Joe Biden wins. I call it like I see it. They wanted Joe Biden to beat Bernie Sanders. One of the representatives admitted this the other night. He was not selected to beat Donald Trump. He was selected to beat Bernie Sanders. Well, you got what you wished for. You got it. And now you have this guy who was already showing signs of decline during the primary debates in 2020, who is now worse off now, is continuing to decline, and it's not going to get better. I'll be very clear about that. Now you're stuck with that guy. Then you had other candidates who wanted to primary challenge Joe Biden. The DNC was completely against it. So they said, we're not going to have a primary. So this is what you got. This is what you asked for. That's what you got. So karma can be a pain in the ass. Democrats are desperate for the dispiriting infighting to end so they can get back to trying to beat the former president. And they're begging either Obama or Pelosi to help them get there. Aware that Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer doesn't have the trust of Biden, and that the House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries doesn't have the depth of relationship to deliver the message. CNN spoke with more than a dozen members of Congress, operatives, and multiple people in touch with both Obama and Pelosi, many of whom say that the end for Biden's candidacy feels clear. And at this point, it's just a matter of how it plays out, even after Thursday night's news conference. So again, if you're just joining, it has now been revealed that Obama and Pelosi privately expressed concerns over Biden. So as I've been saying, again, if Obama not behind you, you know. So I believed that Barack Obama behind the scenes was expressing this concern. And that is why so many Democrats in the House right now feel emboldened to come forward and say that I am not going to support Joe Biden continuing in this race. I wouldn't even be surprised if Obama didn't put them up to it, to put that pressure on Joe Biden to get him to rethink this and to pass the torch. Now, they have been testing Kamala Harris. Behind the scenes, the Biden campaign are testing this out to see, does she have a better possibility to beat Donald Trump, or does he have a better possibility to beat Donald Trump? Let's get into this. What a doozy.
But the reporting is it involves the Biden campaign, and they are assessing the viability of a candidacy by the vice president. Let me bring in Monica Alba. Monica, what can you tell us about how they're looking at Kamala Harris and why?
Well, NBC News is confirming this was first reported by the New York Times, Chris. But what's significant here is that I'm told by a source that's familiar with this testing that is going on this week that this is being done in the context of trying to assess how she would fare against the presumptive Republican nominee as a direct result of what we have seen Donald Trump do in the last couple of days, which is to step up his attacks against her specifically, given there are questions about whether Joe Biden will still be the Democratic nominee in November. He insists that he will, but of course we know, as you were just discussing, because of this pressure from other Democrats and lawmakers, that there could be a change here if the president decides to step aside. So the Biden campaign is doing this. I understand that this is being commissioned by the Biden campaign's own analytics team. And importantly, and what we should point out here, and what a Democratic operative told us, is that essentially this is something you would be doing if you're trying to give a message to President Biden to sort of test how the vice president would do and whether she may fare better, worse, or the same as he is doing in the current polling, that this would be a data point that you could maybe show to the president as he, in the weeks ahead, could potentially have difficult conversations about his candidacy. Again, the Biden campaign is saying that he is full steam ahead. That is what they're certainly insisting publicly. But I think this is a concession session that there are larger conversations going on about if there would be a change at the top of the ticket, and that the natural person, as we've been talking about, the mechanisms for how this would work would be Vice President Kamala Harris. So that is the next sort of part of this story in terms of how she would do. And there has been some polling out there already where they've been trying to sort of test how she would do against Donald Trump. But obviously the Biden team, for their own interests, wants to have their own assessment. And that is why they're going to be continuing with that polling. It sounds like at least this week, and then we'll see what the actual results of that. But we should also point out, Chris, that according to a memo that we obtained today, the Biden campaign and senior advisors are saying that, yes, they're acknowledging there has been real movement in what we've seen in the polls, certainly in those battleground states since the disastrous debate performance 2 weeks ago. But they're insisting that it doesn't amount to a sea change in the state of the race. And so, again, they are trying to argue that Joe Biden is still their candidate, still the nominee, still the person that they're going to go on this journey with. But it is notable that they are zooming out and taking this larger picture should that change.
Okay, to this point here from William, how did the Dems let it get to this point? Because the Democratic Party is reactive and not proactive. They have been bad at this for quite a long time. And I've said it over and over again that they don't try to get ahead of the curve. They like to sit back and just watch and see what happens. And then when shit hits the fan, then they try to say, okay, let's jump in and let's try to do something about it. They've been that way as long as I can remember. If you look at what happened with Roe v. Wade, that was the Democratic Party being reactive instead of proactive. When they had Democrat presidents that were leading at that point, they chose not to codify Roe v. Wade. Barack Obama said it would be the first thing that he did when he was elected. He got elected and said, no, we can't do it because of Lieberman. They could have ended the filibuster. That was an excuse. So they dragged that on for as long as they could. And that's how you ended up with your overturn of Roe v. Wade. That's how that happened. Now, we're going to look at this poll because I want to show you something. So one of the polls that's out now, it's an ABC Ipsos poll. And it shows Biden against Trump. It says Trump 47%, Biden 46%. When they add Kamala Harris to the equation, it's Kamala Harris 49% and Trump 46%. Now, I am going to say this before people freak out, because I know a lot of people are going to see that and be like, there's no freaking way. What you need to remember when you see this poll is that is the national popular poll. So that's the popular vote. That's not what elects the president. Hillary was beating Donald Trump in the polls too, remember? It's the Electoral College that elects the president of the United States. So that's just a national popular poll. This comes down to those swing states, which I continue to remind people, because I think people sometimes forget. But as we get closer to the election, you're going to see this more and more. It's going to come down to those swing states. So I have not seen a poll yet that shows Kamala Harris and Donald Trump up against each other in the swing states. So that I have not seen yet. But people have to remember again, because I can already see it happening. You have to remember that Hillary Clinton was, I think, especially at this point, she was still ahead of Donald Trump in the national poll, the popular poll. Unfortunately for her, Hillary Clinton didn't know how to work the Electoral College. So she lost the Electoral College, but she won the popular vote. It could be that Kamala, although I still doubt this, but it could be that Kamala or Biden could win a popular vote, but that doesn't mean that they're going to win the Electoral College, especially if they struggle in those swing states, which is where Biden is struggling right now. We're going to get to this panel here on MSNBC. They're talking about this as well. How would Kamala Harris fare against Donald Trump instead of Biden?
As President Joe Biden convenes world leaders this week for the NATO summit, Vice President Kamala Harris has been on the campaign trail, continuing to vigorously prosecute the case against Donald Trump, highlighting the stakes of this election in terms of whether or not we remain a democracy. Vice President Harris's campaign tour comes amid growing angst and chatter, even within the Biden campaign and allies themselves, about whether or not the vice president might be better equipped to prevail in November after President Joe Biden's performance in the first debate. New York Times out this afternoon with this reporting, quote, President Biden's campaign is quietly testing the strength of Vice President Kamala Harris against former President Trump in a head-to-head survey of voters. The survey, which is being conducted this week and was commissioned by the Biden campaign's analytics team, is believed to be the first time since the debate that Mr. Biden's aides have sought to measure how the vice president would fare at the top of the ticket. The results of that survey could determine whether Joe Biden remains at the top of the ticket. New York Times also reporting that a key group of advisors to the president believe that the strength of the vice president might sway his decision to stay in this race. Quote, a small group of Mr. Biden's advisors in the administration and the campaign have said they would have to convince the president of several things. They said they would have to make the case to the president, who remains convinced of the strength of his campaign, that he cannot win against former President Donald Trump. They have to persuade him to believe that another candidate, like Vice President Kamala Harris, could beat Mr. Trump. And they have to assure Mr. Biden that should he step aside, the process to choose another candidate would be orderly and not devolve into chaos in the Democratic Party.
And the way that they're going to try to do that is through the polling. So that's why they're conducting these polls privately. Someone mentioned this in the chat already. This is hilarious. Hanging with Dr. Sorry, I got a text today of a survey if I would support Kamala. So there you go. You see, guys, they're already doing it.
In a statement to the New York Times, the White House denied that there was an effort by members of President Biden's team to convince President Biden to exit the race. Joining our coverage, New York Times investigative reporter Mike Schmidt, whose byline is on that New York Times reporting about what the president's advisors are discussing behind the scenes, and the president of the Reproductive Freedom for All, folks that we turn to all the time on all matters, is here for this. Mini Timaraju. Mike Schmidt, take me through what you and your colleagues are reporting in the story about the advisors, as well as the story about the president's own political operatives testing Vice President Harris head-to-head with Trump.
Well, what we're reporting is that there's a realization amongst some of these longtime Biden aides that he's going to have to exit the race, and that the biggest obstacle to that will be having to convince him to do that. And the story really encapsulates what the story of the moment is, which is essentially a standoff between Joe Biden and the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party that is around the edges saying some things, but at the top of the party is not coming out and publicly forcefully asking him to get off the ticket, and the president sort of digging his heels in even further. We report in the story that the president had said before the debate that he thought he had a far better chance of beating Trump than the vice president. This is a conviction that he has maintained in the aftermath of the debate. And different from him, there's a realization amongst some aides that his candidacy is not going to work, that it is too far of an uphill battle, that he needs to step aside, and that they have to figure out a way to get him there and to convince him to do that.
Yeah. This is definitely an embarrassing moment, I think, for the Democratic Party, because and I'm pretty sure Barack Obama is probably like, my legacy. Because I know he said that when Hillary Clinton lost, he was like, my legacy. Vain, aren't they? But it's an embarrassing moment for the Democratic Party. But I also want to show you something else, too. Now, this is coming from CNN here, and they're talking about the Google searches. Now, some people, I think they saw this and they thought, oh, this is a good thing for Joe Biden. But they go on to explain to you why this actually is not a good thing. Listen to this. Run the numbers, post-debate focus now on Biden's candidacy. They're going to talk about this, that Biden led Trump in Google searches, but is that necessarily a good thing? Listen to this.
These are Google searches, all right? The days that Biden led Trump in Google searches this year in 2024. Pre-debate, Biden led Trump, get this, on just 1% of days. The election, for all intents and purposes, really was about Donald Trump, not Joe Biden, despite the fact that Joe Biden, of course, is the incumbent. A very unusual situation. But look at what's happened post-debate. Days in which Joe Biden has led Donald Trump in Google searches. 87% of the days. It's been all but 2 days since the debate in which Joe Biden has led Donald Trump in Google searches. There were only 2 days prior in the entire year in which Joe Biden led Donald Trump in Google searches. That is completely flipped on its head post-debate. This election, for all intents and purposes, has turned into one that is about Joe Biden and not about Donald Trump.
Could that be a good thing, or is this negative?
No. If that head shake doesn't give it away. This,
sometimes, you're Googling and you're not, it's not a bad thing.
You do not want this election to be about Joe Biden if you are Joe Biden, because take a look here. The view of the candidates. Look at this. Negative rating for Joe Biden, 57%. 57% of Americans have a negative view about Joe Biden. You want this to be about Donald Trump because it's not like Donald Trump is beloved by the American public. 54% of Americans have a negative opinion about Donald Trump.
Let me pause here for a second. This is what CNN doesn't understand and gets wrong, or maybe they do understand, but they don't want to say it. When he said it's not like Donald Trump is beloved by the American Republic, apparently he was beloved by enough Americans to win. Apparently he's beloved by enough Americans for this race to be as close as it is. This is where what they get wrong. They still don't get it. It's just like, I don't know how else to say this, but it's just, there are still a lot of people that are Trump fans and Trump supporters. Do I see the Trump support as bold and as popular as it was in 2016? No, I don't. This time around, I don't see it as popular as it was in 2016, but don't get it twisted. There are still many diehard Trump supporters. And then also there are new Trump supporters. That's another thing. People that are so upset with Joe Biden about the economy that they want Donald Trump back because they're saying the economy was better under him than it was under Joe Biden. But the point of this conversation is that just because people are Googling you, that doesn't mean that it's good for you. Sometimes people are Googling because it's bad. The Googling could have been something like, does Joe Biden have Parkinson's? Does Joe Biden have dementia? It could be those types of Google searches. Let's go back here. My mouse's pad is sticking.
But again, if this election is about Joe Biden, this turns into a major issue for him, because I want to take you through a little bit of history, Sarah. Okay. A little bit of a history lesson at this particular hour. Take a look here. Presidents with a 50% disapproval rating at this point in their presidency. Jimmy Carter, George H.W. Bush, Donald Trump in 2020, and now Joe Biden in 2024. What do these three gentlemen have in common? Trump, Bush, and Carter? All of them. They all lost. They all lost the election. So the fact is, Joe Biden at this point does not want to be part of this group. He wants the attention to turn back to Donald Trump, because in all honesty, Sarah, I believe that's really the only way he can win, because if it's a referendum about him, this contest is over.
And that's why they are testing out Kamala Harris, because the numbers, they saw the polling, they knew what was really going on. But again, I have to say this, folks, I'm sorry once again, but the reality is this is the fault of the Democratic Party for not allowing to have a primary process when there were primary candidates. There was Marianne Williamson, Dean Phillips, RFK Jr. was originally running as a Democrat. Remember, they wouldn't give them a fair shake, and that's why he split off and decided to run as an independent. So on a number of issues, if you look back at this is the Democratic Party's fault, because they were not willing to have a serious primary, and now they're stuck with what they got. And then the reality is it's July. November is just around the corner. So if you are going to replace Joe Biden, you don't have that long to do it. And then you have to have that person has to also win over the American public. So it's just very sloppy and messy. It's all over the damn place. And then you have people like Simone Sanders, who, again, I point fingers at her too. Miss Simone Sanders is sitting here and she's going to tell you there was a primary process. We're going to debunk this in real time.
As my former boss, Bernie Sanders, would say, of two things. First, the process, right? It is not the electeds and the party leaders that pick their representatives. The people pick the representatives. And so the process is not that the people, that the elected leadership, this small group, should be picking who the Democratic nominee is, first and foremost. The people picked, and they picked Joe Biden. Now, people can have qualms about the primary process and say they didn't feel like it was open. Well, boo, it was a primary process, okay? We can't say that the primaries weren't had and ballots weren't cast. My progressive friends who would like to live in a fantasy land, they need to come back to reality. Yeah. And the reality is this: the sitting president of the United States of America is a Democrat that would like to run for re-election, so much so that he has declared a re-election campaign. Right. In that case, the Democratic National Committee will not facilitate a primary process. There will be no debate stage for Bobby Kennedy, Marianne Williamson, or anyone else to stand.
So we're going to have another Bobby Kennedy in an empty chair in the debate, right?
There will be no debate.
Yeah, no debate.
The Democratic National Committee administers the debates, and they're not going to set up a primary process for debates for someone to challenge the head of the Democratic Party.
That was May 5th, 2023. Never forget that. So Simone Sanders is paid to lie. You have to understand that. So she told you in 2023 that the DNC is not going to set up a debate process against an incumbent president. So now she's saying that a handful of people don't decide who the person's going to be. Yes, a handful of people do decide who the nominee is going to be. They've been doing this. We watched them do this in 2020. Don't forget about the DNC fraud lawsuit that Bernie Sanders, peeps got together. I interviewed the lawyers, Jared Beck and his wife, on this channel last year. And they explained to me what happened in court and what the court said. The judge ruled that because the DNC is a corporation, they can select the candidates. They can select the nominee. And there's nothing you can do about it because it is a private corporation. I don't think Jared and Elizabeth Beck are doing interviews anymore, because when they came on the show last year, they said that they put their all into that case. And all they wanted to do, they weren't trying to get things overturned so that Bernie would be the nominee. They wanted to get the grassroots money back to the people who gave that money to Bernie, the people who really did not have that money to give. A lot of working class people, a lot of poor people, they wanted those people to get their money back. And the federal judge ruled that. Look up Bruce Spiva. He was the attorney for the DNC. This is why they've always been able to win and have it their way, because, again, Simone Sanders is lying. So the shout out to Case Study QB for that clip, for that flashback there to show people what she said prior. The DNC did not want a primary debate, so this is what they're stuck with. Dean Phillips was the only one who was willing to publicly admit right out of the gate that he was running for president against Joe Biden because he believed Joe Biden was too old. He was very honest about it. Now, I don't support the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. I got burned after Bernie and the squad, so I learned my lesson. But the reality is, if they're testing Kamala, that is not good for Biden. And I don't think that Kamala can beat Trump either. Do you guys think that Kamala can beat Trump? I don't. Kamala, when she was running for president in 2020, remember, she couldn't even get a delegate in California. That's her home state. At one point, she was at the top of the polls. Everybody remember this? And they were trying to really push her. And you see how that slid down rather quickly. But I don't think she can beat Donald Trump either. I don't care what that Ipsos poll says. I'm listening to people on the ground. I'm talking to people in the streets. And that is not what they are telling me. Let's go to part 2, Eric, for Type VNC. It's a hot mess, but they put themselves in this mess. So karma's a bitch, but you guys did it. Let's go to some of the comments here. Let's give a shout out to Cooper for gifting 5 Sabs memberships. Thank you so much, Cooper. That is so nice. Cooper in the house. Cooper in the house. Thank you for the super chat, baby Ethernet. Kamala's cultural pandering as black is repulsive. And another thing, I don't think Kamala's going to do too well with the black voters. A lot of black people not really feeling Kamala like that. Thank you for the super chat, 72 Marshflower. If the Dems were actually autonomous and intelligent, they'd impose age limits for their own in office. They do reek of being GOP controlled opposition. I hear you there. The Oracle says the Democrats are scared of Joe's down ballot impact. Yeah, because you guys know a lot of people vote down ballot. If they see Joe Biden name up at the top, it's just like, Lee says the DNCC selected Biden in their no primary contest, and now they're pretending that they're shocked by what they already knew. You can't make this stuff up. No, you can't, Lee. Thank you, Cooper. Do these Dems think they have a chance this election if they can just get rid of Biden? Such ignorant naivete in grown-ups is kind of sweet. Thank you, Nexus. No one is going to vote for Kamala Harris unless the Dems actually do something smart for the people before the election instead of dangling lies as bait. It's a wrap for 2024. And there's a number of things that they could still do, right? Like stop giving Israel money to kill Palestinian people in Gaza. Stop supporting Israel financially, period. Things like that. I don't know. Increasing the minimum wage, give people a living wage, help people in this country before you go giving money to people in other countries. We got people sleeping out on the street. That is continuing to increase under Biden's presidency. 25% homelessness rate increased by 25%. Thank you. None of your business. Give Kamala executive to eliminate student debt and stop the two wars and she becomes president. Also have temporary expanded health care. That's interesting there. None of your business. Thank you, baby Ethernet. For years, MSM and the DNC knew Biden was slowly deteriorating. This orchestrated coup is emblematic of how little the duopoly has to offer us. Yeah, it's a mask off moment. This is the first time, in my adult life where close friends of mine that are typically diehard Democrat voters are just like, I might sit home. People that always go out and vote, I might stay home. Leroy says polls don't mean anything. Kamala was tapped as being the winner of the primary. We know how that turned out. That's a good point, Leroy. What is going on? I don't know what your name is there, but what is going on? It looks like there's a stove in the picture. So what's the point of the popular vote? That is a good question. Technically, the Electoral College is supposed to go by the popular vote. So, but it's done by the state. So you have to remember that. So, I mean, the thing is obviously, if you win Texas, that's a lot of Electoral College votes. Same thing with California. But they don't want to remove the Electoral College because if they do that, then that means that the most populous cities will be the ones winning every time. So basically, we would probably have a Democrat president every time because you're looking at Los Angeles, New York City, most of those populous cities tend to be blue. And thank you, none of your business. Use Amendment 25 so Kamala becomes president now, then executive order. Thank you, Egg. Wild how they'd say we were going to be the ones to break up the party. And now it's Obama managerial industrial complex Dems versus old blue dogs. Oops. Yeah. They said those of us that are leftists and those of us that supported Bernie or the squad, all of us, they said that we were the ones that would break up the party. I'm not even a part of the party. But it looks like they're doing a good job of that on their own, don't you think? All right. If you haven't had a chance to do so, go ahead and smash that like button. Thank you very much. And we're moving on to our next story. And I'm actually making good time tonight. I'm not always the best about doing that, but let's get into it. So I can't believe this happened, but for whatever reason, A Democrat mega donor decided to debate Cenk Uygur. And you guys know how Cenk gets really heated and starts like getting angry and yelling and all that kind of stuff. This just goes to show you just how desperate, again, the Democratic Party is to try to help Joe Biden. Now, the topic of this discussion is, should Joe Biden drop out? Let's get into this debate. It was on Counterpoints. I caught this earlier this morning. This is really interesting. Check this out.
In 2016, everybody told Joe Biden to step down. Everybody was sure he was too old. Same people made the same points in 2020. Same people are making the same points now. But the democratic process and the deliberative process that chose Joe Biden is the process that we have. It is how American democracy works. The parties choose candidates, and then the nation chooses between them.
It's not just Joe Biden that's in mental decline if we make him our candidate. The whole party's in mental decline if we select Joe Biden as our strongest candidate. I'm not willing to insult the Democratic Party like that.
All right, welcome to Counterpoints Friday. Ryan, we've got some great guests today on the biggest topic, I would argue, in the world right now, which
probably
is the future of.
So let's start with you, Dimitri. You and I spoke a couple days ago, last weekend, about the state of the race. It looked at that point like Biden was done for, like at least from the conventional wisdom in Washington. But you were not persuaded by that, and you said, "Look, you guys are overestimating your ability to change the reality here." And the reality here is that Joe Biden feels like he's still the best candidate. He's going to stay in. Where are you today, and has anything changed about your perspectives since then when it comes to Biden's ability to win the general election?
Yeah, and thank you, Ryan. Thank you for having me. A lot of times the question comes down to whether President Biden can do the job for 4 more years, and that's what it comes down to. But the question that I'm focused on is, what is the most likely way to prevent President Trump from having a second term? And to prevent President Trump from having a second term, from being elected, you need someone to be able to win the nomination of the Democratic Party and also beat Donald Trump in a general election. And for the last 5 years, there's only been one Democrat who's been anywhere close, and only one Republican who's been anywhere close to getting their nominations back. And so we've known for kind of 5 years that this was the most likely rematch. And we knew that both men would have some increasing challenges compared to last time. Biden and Trump, neither of them is the same man they were 4 years ago. And so the question is, did that debate fundamentally alter Biden's electability more than the things that we've learned about Trump and keep learning about Trump, like his criminality and so forth? So that is a real question. It's a fair question. But immediately after the debate, the swing voters seem to have not moved very much. The polls in each of the 3 closest battleground states have moved 3 points, maybe more likely 2 if you look at the weighted averages for poll weight. And right now, Biden is still tied in electoral votes, ahead in electoral votes representing 251 electoral votes. And he's basically tied within the margin of error in states representing another 60 electoral votes.
Let's pause here for a second. And I have to say this before we continue on. First and foremost, you have to remember this is a mega donor. So he is going to protect his investment because he wants a return on his investment. So he is going to defend Joe Biden being the nominee for as long as it takes, because again, he's not just some guy who donated $200. This is a mega donor. That is how he identifies himself. And that is how Breaking Points identified him as well. So that's who's talking here. So just keep that in mind.
So the question is, who's better to win and whose decision is it? And if it's Joe Biden's decision, which it is, he won the nomination, then the burden of proof is not just to prove to me. You have to prove it to the standards of Joe Biden, who's heard these arguments in 2016 and agreed with them, and in 2020 and disagreed with them. And he was always right in those 2 elections, and everybody else was wrong in those 2 elections. So I think we should have some humility here.
And Cenk, how would you prove it to Dimitri?
Yeah, easy on many, many fronts. So number one, he's at 36% approval rating. No incumbent ever in American history, not just president, but at the federal level, has ever won when they're in the 30s in an election year. Number two, he was at +9 at this point in the election in 2020. Now he's in a best case scenario -3. That's 12 points to make up. His approval rating last time when he won, and barely won the Electoral College, was at 52 points. So he's 16 points behind in approval rating. These are all totally unrecoverable. It would be the most unprecedented political comeback in American history by a lot. And a guy in mental decline is going to pull that off. He's shown absolutely no ability to pull that off. In fact, I said that he would lose non-swing states months ago. And here we are. He's now losing 3 non-swing states. Now, New Jersey and New York are in play. So, guys, what is not in dispute is that Donald Trump is a terrible, terrible guy. And we're both trying to make sure that he doesn't win re-election. We just have a very significant difference of opinion on what is the best way to make sure Donald Trump doesn't win. And with Joe Biden, it's a lock. He's not going to pull off the greatest political miracle in American history. Okay, so those are all the numbers, and I can give you underlying numbers. He's lost Latinos, he's lost the youth vote, he's lost almost everything, right? So the idea that it's close is ridiculous. He has a near 0% chance of winning. So that's why I've been on a warpath for 9 months, because I'm like, how could you guys not see it? But all of that is a lead up to me asking Dimitri, is Joe Biden in mental decline?
Let me pause there for just a second, because do you notice what happened there? Cenk was able to bring up data points as to why he thinks Joe Biden needs to drop out. He should not be the nominee. Whereas the mega donor is just, again, he's going with his feelings because he's trying to protect his investment. So I think there's a big difference between the two. And I've had my criticisms of Cenk Uygur because I feel like he's not as far enough to the left as I would like for him to be. And I don't think he should be supporting the Democratic Party anymore, period. But to each their own. That being said, I think that what we do have to consider, even though the polls are showing that it's close between Biden and Trump, I think if you really want to know who's going to win in November, you have to talk to people on the ground. And this is where corporate media messed up in 2016. They were looking at the polls. They weren't talking to people in the ground. They weren't talking to people in rural America. They weren't talking to people that are working poor and people that are working class. On the ground, just everyday average people. They were talking to people that they put together as a part of these focus groups. And these are the people that they put in front of you. And a lot of times people don't know that these people have been hand selected. They always selected to favor the narrative that they want. So oftentimes people that are part of these focus groups may have worked with the Democratic Party in some way, shape, or form, may have canvassed for Joe Biden. These are the types of things they don't tell you, right? But if you really want to know who's going to win, you're going to have to put your ear to the ground. You have to talk to the people. You're going to have to go into neighborhoods that you may not feel comfortable going into, boo. You're going to have to go talk to those people. This is what Hillary Clinton was not willing to do. That's why Hillary Clinton lost. And you would think the Democratic Party would have learned a lesson from that, but they have not. Continue on.
No. He is in physical decline. He's in physical decline.
Yeah.
And the reason that I know that is because emotionally, when I saw that debate, I thought he was in mental decline. So emotionally, when I saw the first 10 minutes of that debate, I was where the House Democratic Caucus is as well. I engaged in a remote medical diagnosis, even though I'm totally unqualified, because I've seen people aging and I was worried that it was mental decline. So I followed up and found out that from everybody, including world-class brain experts that we've hired to assess both Biden and Trump for years, that this is consistent with motor decline. And the best evidence of whether there's mental decline is the job that he's currently doing. And the job that he is currently doing, we still, today, Joe Biden gets pulled in to be the closer in bipartisan negotiations. And we know from Kevin McCarthy's admission against interest that when he does that, he closes the deal and rolls them. We know that today, this month, he is pulled into international negotiations to close the deal. Our allies want him as the closer, personally. That's why he's working 14-hour days in war zones. I remember when I was an associate in McKinsey & Company 20 years ago.
Ah, there it is, McKinsey. There you go, folks. That's who you're dealing with here. That's who you're talking to. Okay? McKinsey consulting firm. This is not one of those firms that anyone can get a job at. It's very competitive, very difficult to get a job at McKinsey, and they usually recruit at certain elite academic institutions. So that's who you're dealing with here, folks.
And I work the kind of hours he's working, I would have moments like that too. And so the question is it age or ability? And the best evidence about whether it's ability is what kind of a job he's doing as president right now. And as presidenting goes, he's pretty good.
No,
the other thing about
no, Dimitri, listen, first of all, I think it's the most obvious thing in the world that he's in mental decline. The great majority of Americans agree with me. And he himself admits he can't go past 8 o'clock at night. That's not a great job of presidenting. Sorry, it isn't. He can't go to the private meetings with the G7 leaders because he's too tired. He himself says all the time, besides which I don't even know what he's saying. He says he's the first black woman to serve with a black president. And that's after he had the questions handed to him, written out. These are the questions. All you have to do is answer them. We have to prove that you're not in mental decline. And he says, I'm the first black woman. Okay, so anyways, but Dimitri.
By the way, you've met Joe Biden over the decades, right? I mean,
I have, yeah. And and he's a disaster right now. He's an absolute disaster right now. But Dimitri, it doesn't really matter whether I agree or what I think or what you think. What I'm obsessed with is what do the American voters think? And that jury's in. You know, most of the polls have it around 72. One outlier had it at 80%. But even if you take the lower number, 72% of Americans think that he is not mentally healthy enough to serve. So we're going to run a guy that at a minimum, 7 out of 10 Americans think his brain is not functioning. And he needs to be president, the hardest job, for another 4 years. The minute we start chanting 4 more years, we lose the election. Dimitri, how do you put up a candidate that 72% of Americans say his brain isn't working?
Yeah.
Let me pause here for a second before Dimitri responds. That's a good comment there, Will. When Biden gets that 3 a.m. call, Jill and Hillary will have to change his opinion. Let me comment here. Notice something about his background. These are just things that I noticed. So notice behind, McKinsey dude, mega donor dude. Notice the background that he chose to set up for this interview, right? Notice where he chose to place his camera. I think that's important. Right here in front of what appears to be a fireplace, and here's the mantle. And you'll see there's the picture, the family photo there, and the family photo shows his wife and his kid. And it also shows his dog, all these pictures of the family. And then there's a little porcelain, figurines here to show, that's intentional in my opinion. I think about these kind of things. He's a mega donor. He knows that people have these strong opinions about the people who are really controlling the money and people that have all this money pouring it into candidates. So he puts himself right in front of this family photo to show that, look, I'm a family guy. I'm a mega donor, but look, I'm not that bad.
So I do agree with your main point, Cenk, which is that the real question is what voters will think. And I agree with you that the voters have rendered a remote diagnosis of Joe Biden that is consistent with your impression and not with the impression that I've gathered from the people I've consulted. So I agree with all of that. The thing that I think when you get to the data about the swing voters, what you are saying is that you would still vote for Biden over Trump, but you don't think they will. And when you cite all these numbers about how badly Biden is doing, that is all just objective, like Biden versus Biden. And the other thing that is unprecedented that we've never had before is running against a convicted felon who launched an insurrection and is now attacking juries. And so the question is not, is Biden objectively, do people like or want him as the nominee? My whole life, the American public has been dissatisfied with the person who the major parties have put forth for them to choose. It's worse now. But that is not the question. The question is the two-way. And the two-way, all of the models that I have seen, from the most anti-Biden model, which is Nate Silver's, to the most pro-Biden model, which is 538, to all the betting markets, they all put this race within the range of Biden having a 30% to 50% chance. 538 says it's 50-50.
So first of all, 538 has been wrong countless times. And second of all, the fact that an incumbent president, that is the chance, even the 30%, that's still low. That's ridiculous. To his point, he said, well, he's running against a convicted felon, which is why it shouldn't be that close. Mackenzie, we're just going to call him Mackenzie. That's why it shouldn't even be that close. So he's running against a convicted felon and it's still this close. What does that tell you, Mackenzie? Aye.
You could be wrong. You could be right. I'm just saying that all of the aggregators and all of the models looking at the polls disagree with you that his odds of winning are zero. And the swing voters who you are sure will not vote for Biden, when they see Biden and Trump side by side, it's the same choice as last time, except both men have new liabilities. Biden has shown something that people generally perceive to be performance-related aging, even though I disagree. And also, Trump has acquired his relation. He's bragged about Roe v. Wade. He's allied himself with rural theocrats. He is if anything, I believe that Donald Trump has revealed himself to be more dangerous than last time, whereas the evidence that Joe Biden can be a great president is stronger than last time because he's been one. So I think the two-way is the question. And thus far, the two-way does not appear to be moving the way you seem certain it will move.
Yeah,
So,
Cenk, what do you make of this point, by the way? I was just checking. It's very odd. We were looking at this earlier on Wednesday. 538 does say 52-48 for Trump right now. 52% chance that Trump wins, 48%. I think Biden is probably clinging to that. I think Dimitri's clinging to that. But I'm curious how you would respond to 538's assessment that this is sort of a toss-up.
And this is where you got to push back on Ryan Grimm. Ryan Grimm should know better by now. Again, you guys already pointed out in the chat, but it's true. 538 was wrong in 2016. They've been notoriously wrong countless times.
So look, 538 that's nuts. I'd bet them any amount of money that they're like off by a landslide. I mean, that is a preposterous thing to say. I mean, 52-48 on which planet? Guys, 7 to 8 out of 10 Americans think his brain is not working. They're not going to vote for him. Now, that doesn't mean Blue MAGA isn't going to vote for him. Blue MAGA is going to vote for him no matter what. And when it comes down to election day, we're all going to have to make a super tough decision, okay? Because Trump's terrible. Like you mentioned, the convictions. I know, but that's already baked in. That's already baked in. It isn't moving anyone. Guys, whenever we're talking about the election, again, I agree with Dimitri on something. We have to be talking about the swing voters, the independent voters. It doesn't matter what we think. We hate Trump. If it was just us voting, it'd be a landslide for Biden, okay?
So let's talk about the independent voters for just a second. We all need to remember that Joe Biden did win a significant amount of independent voters, more than I thought he would have in 2020. Let's remember he was able to win Arizona because a lot of the independent voters voted for Joe Biden. Where does he stand right now with the independent voters? Some of them have moved over towards RFK. Some of them are moved back over towards Donald Trump. Some of them are just deciding, I'm just going to sit this out altogether. So it wasn't just Democrats that helped Joe Biden win, registered Democrats. It was also registered independents that helped Joe Biden win. This time around, too, what I think Mackenzie dude is leaving out of his philosophy is that you also now have independent and third party candidates in this race that have pretty big name recognition, which you did not have in 2020. Yes, the Green Party still had Howie Hawkins, but he wasn't a big name. So you have Cornel West, you have RFK, you have Jill Stein. Like these are people that are pretty well known. And you have 3 of them. We don't know if all of them are going to make it until November, but if it stays that way, so you can't leave that out of the conversation. As much as people like the mega donors want to leave that out and pretend like they're not a part of this race, if they stay in until November, they will have an impact. Not only do the polls show that, but if you talk to people on the ground, they'll tell you that. People have told me they're going to vote for this third party candidate or that independent that's the thing. So it's difficult to compare it to 2020 because you did not have those elements in play.
The other side hates Biden. Forget blue MAGA and red MAGA. The middle is what matters. And the middle thinks that Joe Biden's brain isn't working. They're not going to elect him for another 4 years. And the other problem, Dimitri, is it isn't just, hey, Biden versus Trump. why not have a candidate that would be crushing Trump? Because Trump has those liabilities no matter what. So why are we putting up a guy that has at least the same amount of liabilities? Imagine a ticket like Andy Beshear and Wes Moore, two young, dynamic, successful Democratic governors. One guy won twice in Kentucky. The other guy is this dynamic, great speaker who's the governor of Maryland. Oh my God, imagine how excited Democrats would be if they had that ticket. We would crush Trump.
And here's where Cenk fails, and I think he knows better than this. We have this governor from Maryland who's a great speaker. You see, that's the same thing that people said about Barack Obama. He's a great speaker. And how did that turn out? So it's not enough to be a great speaker. It's not enough to have political experience or to be a governor of a state. That's not enough. You have to be willing not to be bought and paid for. You have to be willing to shut down corporate money. You have to be willing to have a message, more so a populist message that's going to resonate with a lot of people, particularly those who are working class. That's how, and this is the thing, this is how Bernie Sanders was able to build such a big movement, because he had that message. Trump had somewhat of a populist message too when he ran in 2016. Why do you think? Don't people realize that by now? That's why they were able to build the coalition that they built. So this whole idea of someone is a great speaker, those are the Obama days. That's not good enough anymore. And if anything, if that's all they've got going for them, that should be a red flag for you. I think we have learned from 2008. Yes.
Why do we want to, at a bare minimum, risk losing? In my opinion, guarantee losing. And I don't, there's no planet where a guy at 36% has a 48% chance of winning. A guy at 36% at incumbent has a 0% chance of winning. It's literally never, ever, ever happened before. And so you're saying that Biden is as great a politician as AOC was in her run against Joe Crowley, and way better than that, way more dynamic than that, because it takes an AOC like miracle to win at this point. So why don't we pick someone better? What is wrong with us? Why do we want to pick our worst candidate instead of our best candidate? This is a no-brainer as long as you're not in mental decline.
Yeah, Dimitri, what is wrong with us?
What's wrong is that people have gotten used to accepting crumbs. I think I want to go to the decline portion of this debate here. We're going to go to decline. People are used to accepting crumbs because, what is it? Trump bad? Orange man bad? That's what I believe.
A person displaying those symptoms with Parkinsonian, whatever it was, Ryan, Parkinson's, or this variation of Parkinson's.
None of us are trying to get our medical degrees.
Yeah, thank goodness. That would be bad for everyone. But you're maintaining, Dimitri, that what we see from Joe Biden reflects physical decline, but not mental decline.
Yeah. So the George stuff. So a couple of things. One, you might want. The whole point of why this is an important conversation, from my perspective, and why we're out there so much, is you can do that mashup reel for Donald Trump, and it's way scarier, right? And if you do, there are plenty of psychologists who have jeopardized their careers by remotely observing that Donald Trump is a dangerous man who cannot distinguish truth from reality and whose mind is broken. In the George Stephanopoulos interview, what are some of the other things that Biden said? Biden repeatedly insisted that it was his decision, his problem, his fault that the debate went poorly. All around, people were urging him to throw staffers under the bus for debate prep. And his top priority in this limited period of time to talk to George Stephanopoulos, that he insisted on several times, was to make sure everybody knew the buck stopped with him. That is why he is a good president. That is why he builds a good team. That is why people trust him. That is why international leaders trust him. That is still true. And Donald Trump, Joe Biden took responsibility in that Stephanopoulos interview, that one Stephanopoulos interview, more than Donald Trump has his entire life. So the comparison, I've had grandfathers and family members who have had Parkinson's and have had Alzheimer's and strong as an ox, and there are differences. And what Biden showed in that interview with Stephanopoulos, as well as in his interview with Morning Joe, is the kind of role that you get And people are criticizing him for reading off of a list, reading notes. I have notes right now. Presidents should be using notes when they're presidenting, I think. And they're upset with him for having actually the only psychologically healthy response to this terrible moment, which is to say, Donald Trump could be president and I can only do my best. That's the psychologically healthy response. And so in all of these things, I'm like, Biden's right.
No, Dimitri. See, this is the problem. Just because Donald Trump could be president doesn't mean that the American people should just settle for whatever they could get. That type of thinking is wrong-minded. And I'm getting really tired of it. And I tell you about that, anything in your life, anything that you have in your life where you have the option to have the best or just settle for what is right in front of you, I would tell you to wait for the best. You don't just take crumbs just because, oh, you might end up with that over there on the other side. This is why the American people don't win. This is why working class people don't get anything. This is why they don't do anything for us in this country. And you want to talk about reparations? You're not going to get it because, again, the Democratic Party has been convinced for years that they don't have to do anything to earn the Black vote. That's why they don't do anything for the Black communities. That's why the school's still falling apart. The roads falling apart. That's why they don't care. They don't have to do anything. They ain't got to earn it. Dimitri invested a lot of money in Joe Biden. And it appears that Dimitri's not happy that his investment may not work out for him.
So, Cenk, let's say that Biden does end up stepping aside. And in that hypothetical, there are a lot of Democrats who are saying that, okay, it's Kamala's, and we're all going to rally behind Kamala. Cenk, where are you on that? And what do you think Democrats should do in order to get a new nominee if Biden does drop out? And again, Dimitri's take on that as well.
Yeah, so I'm going to answer that in 1 second. I just got to mention a couple of things that were mentioned earlier. So first of all, I think Biden is the goodest candidate. When you're trying to prove that you're the best candidate and you're saying you're the goodest candidate, come on, brother. George Stephanopoulos said today, after the interview, I don't think he can make it another 4 years, which goes to the 3 a.m. point that you made, Dimitri, which actually is a point that one of our members on Young Turks made, which I thought was so smart. You get the call at 3 a.m. You say, hey, Trump would be worse. I get it, brother. That's why we're all working overtime to try to defeat him. And Biden always says, don't compare me to the almighty, compare me to the alternative. But the alternative isn't just Trump. The alternative is a better Democratic candidate. And so when that 3 a.m. call comes in, you're saying the administrative state would handle it. But then we're putting up the administrative state as our candidate. And what are we going to do? Pull a Feinstein and wheel him around for 4 years and pretend he's president when the administrative state is the president? And then we're saying we're trying to protect democracy. That makes a mockery out of democracy. We cannot go in that direction. We have to be the defenders of democracy. We have to be the defenders of truth. And with Joe Biden, we're in a massive hole on both lying, because he's, in my opinion, and in the opinion of 72% of Americans, clearly lying about his mental condition. And, we want stability and someone to make the right decisions. Here we go again. Right. And so these are two giant problems that other Democrats wouldn't have. So now that goes to Ryan's question.
Before
the 3 a.m. And he said, baby, it's 3 a.m. I must be lonely. You guys remember that song? He had a Matchbox 20 moment. One of the bands that people say they can't stand, right? People say they can't stand Matchbox 20 and the other one is Nickelback. But somehow these bands still tend to sell out their shows. Somebody likes Matchbox 20. Somebody likes Nickelback.
Before we go to Kamala, because I think that's a really important point that I want to hear Dimitri's response to. That is my read here, that Democrats are sacrificing all of their credibility when they say that democracy is on the line. And then also saying, but actually, the president's kind of overrated, whoever the president is, just the administrative state is going to run it. Or by saying something that people don't believe with their own eyes and that they don't have the credibility to lose. So how concerned are you about Cenk's point there, that if Democrats are running on the idea that if actually things will be fine, there's a whole state, there's a whole apparatus of advisors around him, that undermines Democrats' credibility with voters when they go to say we're here running to defend democracy?
So there's two things about that, Ryan. One is remember, I was stipulating, let's assume that Cenk and the 72 million Americans are right. And let's assume all that. Even then, the team around Biden and the instincts of Biden, the instincts to take personal accountability. If you guys are right that he's lost it, then even his lost instinct, his instincts are to take personal accountability. That's significant. The broader point, however, is that actually I don't agree with these points. I don't agree. Like, it is true that for a long time, humans looked up at the sun and saw that it circled the earth, and we saw it with our own eyes. And of course, any alternative was silly. And then some math. And then we're like, oh, right, actually, the earth circles the sun. It is possible to do math, check your priors, check your eyes. And in this case, this is a guy who is competent. And in terms of his ability to beat Trump, to be clear, it is a close call as to whether there is another human being other than Joe Biden who can unite the Democratic Party and defeat Donald Trump. To date, he is the only one who's done that. He's the only one who did it last time. He's the only one who has done it this time. And the reason he's done it, you guys are talking about a bunch of things that are bad about Joe Biden, and that's fine. I'm not saying they're not bad, whatever. The important thing is there are also things that are good about Joe Biden, things that the Americans trust about Joe Biden. The MAGA global movement has spent an enormous amount of money and resources to persuade swing voters that Joe Biden is corrupt.
If we trust him so much, why is his approval rating so low?
And it's failed. It succeeded against everybody else, but it failed against him. That is his superpower. People cannot unsee Biden's honesty and decency any more than they can unsee Donald Trump's business acumen. Now, I think Donald Trump doesn't have any business acumen, but I'm not going to be able to persuade swing voters of that. It's baked in. Same thing for Biden. Biden has a unique brand strength that makes him uniquely good against Donald Trump. And that is what he believes, and that is what I believe. Now, you don't believe it, fine. But remember, it's his decision. He was the nominee. So I am not saying that I very much believe that the presidency is at stake. I very much believe that which of these two presidents is president matters greatly. I very much believe that Biden is the sort of person, even if he was all the things Cenk said, he's the guy who keeps a Trump prosecutor in place to put his own son in jail. He's the guy that sits for a deposition with Robert Hur, even when our ally is being attacked on October 7th. He's the guy.
First of all, his son is not in jail. And second of all, that's what you're supposed to do. You're not supposed to have some type of you're not supposed to have some type of special treatment for your son when he's a criminal. So there's that. Why are we giving him cookies for that? Why are we doing that, Mackenzie?
Who will step down peacefully if he loses this election, even though Donald Trump has promised to use the state against him. These are indications of a tremendous commitment to the rule of law. And for us to judge that someone else would be better, sure, that's debatable. I don't think so. He doesn't think so. And the Democratic swing voters continue. Yes, they don't like him. But if you compare him to the other alternative.
So, and this is the problem, what he just said right there. They don't like him, but if you compare him to the alternative, well, why should you vote for something you don't like? If you think back to when you were younger, how many of you grew up in a household where your mom gave you that rule where you had to eat everything that was on your plate or otherwise you couldn't get dessert, right? And I remember growing up and thinking to myself, like, but mom, I really don't like these peas. And my mom's like, eat your vegetables. I like vegetables, but I don't like peas. Eat that food. You eat what we make in this house. And I used to remember, like, as I got older, I was like, Mom, why would you make us eat something that we don't want to eat? Why not just save that for you or dad or someone else who really does want to eat those damn peas? And these are just things that I thought about, So when we talk about voting for presidents, if you don't like the guy, why are you voting for something that you don't like? Because you have been convinced that the other alternative is so worse. So you feel like you have to. Then at that point, they've convinced you that by doing so, you are saving not only democracy, wink, wink, but you're also saving the country. Meanwhile, another person comes in or the same person is reelected and nothing really improves for the American people. You would think that we have learned this lesson by now. This duopoly needs to be broken. This system is so corrupt Things need to change politically in this country. The fact that other countries have multiple parties and people vote in those multiple parties and they're actually viable, that says something. We are so far behind in this country politically. I'm so sick and tired of you only have red team or blue team. I want other teams. And I don't think there's anything wrong with wanting other teams. You can watch the full interview there on Breaking Point's Counterpoints show there. But man, what a discussion. Mackenzie guy there. Thank you for the super chat, Sparky. How scary is Kamala? Remember, Putin was on the fence about invading Ukraine until he heard Kamala's speech at the Munich Security Conference. Oh boy. Jim, how does RFK poll against Trump? He's losing in every poll except one. There was one poll that he pointed to, excuse me, which he said is why he should have been on the debate stage, where he was actually beating Donald Trump. Thank you, Sparky, for this one. Love you, Sabby. Love you too. Thank you, Zach. I live and work in this economy where $4,400 to my name feels like a lot, but then over 30% of that goes to rent and other bills. It's rinse and repeat. Exactly. I mean, a lot of people are paying for rent. That's where a lot of our money goes. And the rent will continue to go up, but your wages are not going up. It's ridiculous. Tia says Trump is a criminal, but Biden is the type of criminal who has blood on his hands. Damn. Thank you, Sparky. Make Ukraine Russia again. Thank you for this one as well. Don't even leave a patch called Ukraine lest it remain a NATO playground, carpetbaggers, money laundry, and becomes a Black Rock property. The Oracle says Joe won a rigged primary where his true cognitive impairment was hidden from the primary voters by refusing debates. That's right. We got to remember, a lot of people were not paying attention to politics until now. Most people are not paying attention to, who they're going to vote for president until the election year. So even though I've been talking about this for 3 years, most people are just now tuning in and they're like, whoa, what is happening to Joe Biden? Right? Thank you, Sparky. Hunter/Kushner 2024. That's a joke there from Sparky. Thank you for this as well. When Putin and Kim Jong-un and Xi find out President Kamala is a woman of easy virtue, they'll pass her around like a rag doll in a biker gang. Okay, Sparky, I don't think so. Thank you for the super sticker, Marvin. Shout out to Marvin. Thank you with our eyes. In 2018, we paid to name Jinx Studio iPad Green Lover's Dream, and we made it anonymous. Fight the Power is related to Green Lover's Dream. Look at GLD also. We recently notified TYT to unveil iPad name. I did not know that. That is interesting. Thank you for this as well, Sparky. McKinsey, where have I heard that company before? Colin, shout out to Colin from Indie News Network. Why shouldn't the question be, why doesn't the American people deserve the best candidate we can get? Why must we settle for mediocre politicians? Yep. Thank you, Zach. Dr. Shiva for president. Thank you for the super sticker, Kuznetsky. And thank you, Egg. Sorry, Cenk. Obama peddled the most flowery articulate BS of all time, and we're over our oration phase. Time to do better and talk about issues. Thank you, Baby Ethernet. Elite schools created him. Zero critical thinking. Brandslayer says, I'm independent now. It baffles me how people are still going to vote for Joe because they are scared of Project 2025. Not to mention, when you look at Project 2025, these are things they've already been doing. This is not something that's new. I highly recommend that all of you look at Project 2025, and then you'll see, oh, this is what Republicans have already been doing. Raw, Matchbox is better than Nickelback, but overplayed either way. Oh. You guys know the lead singer from Matchbox 20, Rob Thomas? Remember he had that song with Santana? Let me make sure I got my clip up. Remember the song that he had with Santana? Let me see if I can do it in his voice. I can't. Well, it's a hot one. I can't do it the way it's him. But anyway, it's a hot one. Dude. just like the ocean under the moon. Remember that song? It's going to get stuck in your head again now. The Smooth song. Yes, Winchester, the Smooth song. Well, it's a hot one. Do, do. Oh, that was my jam. Okay. If you haven't had a chance to do so, go ahead and smash that like button. And we're going to move on to the Joe Biden press conference story. Oh, I know. It's in everybody's head now. Just make it real. Just forget about it. All right. Anywho, last night, Joe Biden had the big boy conference. I didn't get to see it because I was live during that time, but I did watch it and watch some of the clips of it after the fact. There were a couple of gaffes that happened during that conference. You may have seen some of them already. If you're on Twitter, let's go ahead and get started with some of those and tell you what people are saying about his performance in that conference after that. I think one of the ones that went really viral was that Joe Biden called Zelensky Putin. And Zelensky was standing right next to him. Let's show that one. This one really made the rounds.
And now I want to hand it over to the president of Ukraine, who has as much courage as he has determination. Ladies and gentlemen, President Putin. President Putin. He's going to beat President Putin. President Zelensky. I'm so focused on beating Putin, we got to worry about it. Anyway, Mr. President.
And there's Zelensky right there. So he was standing right next to him. So that's another thing. You know, people are like, oh, maybe it was just a slip up, but he was standing right next to him. So there's that. Ouch. So, you know, people are going to be watching him a little bit more closely now. I also believed this is also why they didn't allow Joe Biden to have as many press appearances and interviews last year, because they knew what was going on. Then there was the gaffe about Kamala Harris, who apparently is now Donald Trump. Let's get into that one.
Question for you is, how are you incorporating these developments into your decision to stay? And separately, what concerns do you have about Vice President Harris's ability to beat Donald Trump if she were at the top of the ticket?
Look, I wouldn't have picked Vice President Trump to be vice president, but I think she's not qualified to be president.
Yikes. Wouldn't have picked Vice President Trump to be president if he wasn't qualified to be president. So apparently Kamala Harris is actually Donald Trump.
So let's start there. Number one, the fact is that the consideration is that I think I'm the most qualified person to run for president. I beat him once, and I will beat him again. Secondly, the idea, I served in the Senate a long time. The idea that senators and congressmen running for office worry about the ticket is not unusual. And I might add, there are at least 5 presidents running or incumbent presidents who had lower numbers than I have now.
They lost
later in the campaign. So there's a long way to go in this campaign. And so I'm just.
This is why they were hiding him from the I'm telling you guys, this is why they weren't allowing him to make as many press appearances, because they saw what was happening in real time. Then there was the comment that he made comparing his numbers in the US to his numbers in Israel. You can't make this up.
I mean, my numbers are better in Israel than they are here. But then again, they're better than a lot of other people here too. But anyway, I mean, my numbers are better in Israel than they are here. But then again, they're better than a lot of other people here too. But anyway.
There was a lot of anyways, right? But anyway, you know, just resting on that, which I don't think he should continue doing. And not everything's just in any way. Then there was this awkward moment where he didn't realize that he is the commander in chief. Oh my God.
I'm following the advice of my commander in chief, the chief of staff of the military, as well as the Secretary of Defense and our intelligence people. I'm following the advice of my commander-in-chief, the chief of staff of the military, as well as the Secretary of Defense and our intelligence.
This is elder abuse. I mean, this is just not. It's a bad look. And then there was this moment when Biden was asked about what should voters do if they don't feel that he's up for the job. And he really said it here, folks.
If I may, your convention is coming up where your delegates are pledged to make you the official nominee. If they have second thoughts, are they free to vote their conscience?
Obviously, they're free to do whatever they want, but I get overwhelming support. Overwhelming support. I won, I forget how many votes I won in the primary. Overwhelming.
So again, being disingenuous, and all of them are doing it when they talk about he won the primary and how many votes he got in the primary. They're leaving out the fact that the DNC would not hold a real primary, and they weren't allowing those candidates to even have a debate against Joe Biden because they knew that he would perform poorly. The press, for the most part, tried to ignore them as much as they could, although some were able to break through. But the reality is the DNC had already set the stage for that and said that there wouldn't be a primary. So it's easy to say that you won when the majority of Americans had no idea that you had competition.
And so tomorrow, if all of a sudden I show up at the convention, everybody says we want somebody else, that's the democratic process. It's not going to happen.
Even if that means they vote for someone else?
Sure.
If I may,
Did you hear what he just said there? Even if that means we'll go to it. Listen to this. Listen to him carefully.
Even if that means they vote for someone else?
Sure.
So there's Joe Biden telling people that, when he says vote with your conscience, she said, even if that means voting for someone else, he said, sure. Does he even want to win? You heard it there, folks. It wasn't me. That came directly from Joe Biden, where he told you to just vote for someone else. Vote for your conscience. Sure. I want to show you something else, too, because I thought this was really funny. This is making the rounds as well, since Kamala Harris is now Donald Trump. This is wrong. There's the emoji there from the Tory laughing. I'm sorry. We'll get back to the rest of it. I don't know who comes up with this stuff. Anywho, so of course, conservatives are capitalizing on this. Lindsey Graham really took this opportunity to go ham.
This needs to stop. I'm tired of being told there's nothing wrong with Joe Biden. Do you want him in a room with Putin or Xi? I wouldn't let the guy buy me a car. This needs to stop. I'm tired of being told there's nothing wrong with Joe Biden. Do you want him in a room with Putin or Xi?
I don't want Lindsey Graham in a room with Putin or Xi either. You're just another warmonger too. That's the funny part about that. Like, I wouldn't trust you to be in the room with them either. You're not going to talk peace. You're just going to talk more war. So after all of that jazz, CNN hosted a focus group discussion, and they're going to ask these voters how they felt about Joe Biden's performance. Now, these voters just happen to all be women, and they just all happen to live in Michigan. How convincing. Isn't that interesting? Michigan, one of the swing states where the uncommitted campaign is happening, and they're all women.
I get a sense from voters of how tonight went in their eyes. Tonight, our Gary Tuckman has been talking to a group of seniors in Kalamazoo, Michigan. Gary, what have you been hearing?
Well, I understand we are in the battleground state of Michigan, in the western part of the state. This is the Portage Senior Center, where seniors between the ages of 50 and 150 could come for exercise and fun. These ladies, we have 7 ladies here, all of them like Joe Biden. None of them are voting for Donald Trump, but we want to see how they feel about the problems that Biden has been having and how they thought his news conference just went. Now,
Look at everybody in the room. This is their focus group. I told you they select these people. Everybody in the focus group looks the same. Everybody. You know, how tone deaf can you be? There are no young voters in the focus group. No shade on older people, but no young voters are part of this focus group. I don't see any men included in this focus group. These are all older white women. Where is everybody else? Seriously? Jesus Christ. Now think about it. If Fox News did this, don't you think that the Democratic Party would call this out? Don't you think that CNN will call it out? This is who they're talking to, folks.
Out of all 7 of you, how many of you think it was better than you expected, this news conference? How many think it was better than you expected it would be? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How many of you think it was worse than you expected it would be? How many of you think it was the same? So overall, it's a fairly positive review. I know we were watching it together. They all just got out of exercise class. So that's why they're dressed like that. I told you I would tell everybody that. But we were watching it together, and when he confused the names of Trump and Harris when talking about vice president, you all kind of gasped. But it got better, right? Is that what you think?
So again, they all just came out of the exercise class. So 9 times out of 10, all of these women probably know each other. What kind of focus group is this?
Now, 4 of you, 1, 2, 3, 4, all of you think that Biden should be staying in the race. You told me you think that he should pass the torch. The 2 of you weren't decided. My question for you, you weren't decided before this happened if he should stay in the race. How do you feel now after watching this news conference?
Relieved, and I think he should stay in.
So your opinion has changed from not sure to he should stay in?
Yes.
Okay. And how about you? How do you feel? You weren't sure. How do you feel now?
Same. I think he's the logical choice.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now you thought he should pass the torch. How do you feel right now?
I still believe he should pass the torch.
And why do you say that?
I think he conveyed more defensiveness versus confidence, and I think we are really craving to be able to be confident about the candidate that we carry into the November election.
How did you feel about this news conference just now? Did it give you more confidence in Joe Biden?
I have all the confidence that I did yesterday. So I just...
Were you confident yesterday?
Yeah, because everybody has a bad day. And I could see that he was sick, but for some reason, they decided to do what they were going to do, even though he was sick. And I think that might have been a bad choice. And you just saw him when he's sick and when he's tired and those sorts of things. But at the heart of it, he's a strong guy.
What do you think?
How do you know that? You see what I mean? Like, they hand selected these women. And again, this is how rigging happens. It starts with the media first. Because the media, corporate media, they push the narrative. This is why independent media is so important, because we're not showing you this. When you see me go out on the street and I talk to people on the ground, does everybody look the same? Is everyone the same age? Did they all just come out of an exercise class and they're all friends together? No, the people are different. But they don't want the different voices because this is the narrative that they want you to hear. They're trying to push this to show the American people, see, this group of women, they said that he should stay in. They thought he did a great job. Not to mention all these women look the same, especially coming from the channel that's talking about we need diversity. The CNN channel that's always quick to say there needs to be diversity. I don't see any diversity in this focus group. They all came out of the same damn class.
Agree with that?
Yes, I would agree with that. I think what came across was that of what he is. Joe Biden is very caring about people. He's very knowledgeable and experienced, and he's not just out for himself, that he really cares about the country.
And there's no chance that you would be more confident with the Kamala Harris or your governor here, Whitmer, here in the state of Michigan.
Right. Yeah. I think Joe Biden did an excellent job.
During this news conference.
Mm-hmm.
But was there any part of you before this that said, I'm not so sure that I can still support him and I want another Democrat?
I've always been confident in him.
Any of you going to be watching the Republican National Convention? It starts Monday. No hands going up. Democratic National Convention 5 weeks after that? Okay. Not all these.
See, you see what the problem is, guys? This is what's holding us back. I really have a lot of hope for the younger people, and I've said that multiple times on this show, because they're not buying the bullshit. They're less likely to believe the bullshit. Now we get to MSNBC, and we're going to go to this panel here. Boy, this is a doozy. They tried their best to defend Biden. Let's jump in.
It was really a very interesting and I think unpredictable hour in terms of how much news the president was going to break. I mean, we're all watching for the president's performance here, but he did also break some news just on the issue of domestic politics, talking about saying the delegates to the Democratic Convention are free to vote their conscience, describing that, answering that in such a way as if that's obvious. That's not necessarily a thing that is obvious. Also, the president laying down at the very end of his remarks there a sort of predicate for what it would take for him to leave the race. He said he would leave the race if his advisors came to him and showed him the data that said there was, quote, no way you can win, meaning no way that President Biden, could win. He then also said emphatically that no poll says that. But he's essentially establishing that as the threshold that would need to be crossed if he was going to leave. So, and I won't go on at length. I will just say, though, you noted that there were some moments of, startlingly impressive command of the issues. This is just my opinion. He is not only strong on foreign policy, he is just fundamentally right on foreign policy in the way that.
No, he's not. And that's another thing that's hurting his polling among young voters. He's not right on foreign policy. The majority of young voters don't want these wars. They don't want that to continue. This is a new generation. It is a new time. So no, he's not right on foreign policy. He's not right to continue to send money to Israel and keep killing kids in Gaza. He's not right about that. He's not right to keep sending billions of dollars of weapons to Ukraine instead of helping people here in this country when you know damn well Ukraine from day one was never going to win this war. He's not right on foreign policy. And this is the generational divide. This is the division right here. The people who still want to protect the war machine and the people who are tired of it. And that includes all of them. Call them out one by one. You got Emoji Dude. You got Bob Burger's character there. You got Joy. You got that other woman whose name I always forget. They are not a part of this because they are a different generation. They don't get it. And they're paid not to get it. The Democratic Party over the years just moved further and further to the right.
He talks about it. And again, your mileage may vary. That is how I feel about the way he talks about our relationship with our allies and our relationship with NATO. You can hear his command of the issues, particularly in his asides, like mentioning as an offhand way that it was Turkey really that needed really to be talked into an expansion of NATO that included Finland and Sweden, talking about the numbers of Russian troop losses in Ukraine, talking about the fact that he turned in his notes after he spoke privately with President Xi, alluding to the fact that Trump had all those weird meetings with the Russians and Putin in which he had no note taker present. I mean, it's even in the little asides where it just shows you he is a master of the foreign policy field and has been for decades in his career in the Senate, the vice president, and the presidency. And
he's a murderer. That's what he is. Like, I don't get this at all. I really don't. They are so out of touch.
And yet he undercuts his own presentation of those facts simply in the way that he presents them, with his self-interrupting and elliptical style, the very soft-spoken monotone that he sometimes uses. There's a big mismatch between his stylistic presentation and his truly masterful command of the subject matter on the subject that was the main focus of this presser, which was foreign policy.
That's, I think, incredibly well said. I would also note on foreign policy, he also got a question about Israel, a very long answer that was interesting, and I think measured in ways that some of his previous statements on that conflict haven't quite been. He also said, it's time for this war to end. I mean, that statement, which also struck me as news. It's time for this war to end, I believe, was the sentence that he uttered. Let me go to you.
It's performative. Let me be very clear, okay? Netanyahu was coming here July 24th. So I'm going to tell you something these pundits won't tell you. That statement from Joe Biden is performative. If he wanted the war to end, he would not give Israel the money. We're the largest supplier. We're the one giving them the most money. Germany is second after the United States. If we were to pull out, they could stop this. So he's still doing that. Netanyahu will be here on the 24th to ask for more money. You think he's just coming to sit down and have crumpets and tea? He's here for money. And I bet you he'll leave DC with more money, just like Zelensky does that. So that is performative, ladies and gentlemen. This is not, I just want to get this through to people's heads as much as possible. Joe Biden has found a way to string this along, this genocide along, as long as he can, probably all the way up until November. And that's one of the things the Democrats are going to use. Well, you can get a little bit of genocide or a lot of genocide with Donald Trump. And that's what people have been saying. This can end. People are starving in Gaza. Not everyone has been bombed. Some of them are dying because they are starving, because Israel stopped the food from coming in. And it's just, I don't know how anyone who has children and has seen those images can look at their kids and feel okay. Because if you can, there is something wrong with you. All of it stops right here. If he wanted the war to stop, he would have stopped it.
Joy, for your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think in some ways this was a classic Biden. Foreign policy is his bailiwick. He was, chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. As he mentioned, this is his strong point. And I think the parts where the press conference went into foreign policy and became rather sort of a mundane press conference, this was not like strictly the White House press corps. So it gave President Biden an opportunity to be normal. A lot of this struck me as just very normal. And I think that is something that he needed. This was President Biden as the longtime policy wonk. He gave himself credit for getting 50 nations to agree to expand NATO. He was very, there was a lot of sort of self-praise of his own foreign policy, which I think is important.
Expanding NATO is not a selling point to a lot of voters, not just young voters, but those that are registered independents. That is not a selling point. Again, Joy Reid knows this because she says one thing on MSNBC, but then she does these little TikTok videos where she tells you exactly how she really feels. So she's an actress. All of these people are actors. You can look at Emoji Dude and see it. Chris Hayes is acting. Rachel Maddow is an actress. These people are not journalists. They're paid to act and to sell a narrative.
He touted his victories. He had a really passionate moment at the end where he talked about the fact we need to control guns, not girls. And he got really passionate about more children being killed by a bullet than any place on earth in the United States of America.
You cannot talk about the children being killed by gun violence in the United States of America when you are aiding and supplying a genocide of children in Gaza. This is laughable to me. It's laughable because the hypocrisy knows no bounds. No bounds. I thought everybody was supposed to care about the children, right? Wasn't there a song with Whitney Houston where she said the children are the future? Right? Weren't there all those music videos in the 1980s where people were like, save the children and help the children? I thought everyone was supposed to care about the children, but I guess it's only certain children. Is that what it is? You can't sit up here and talk about the gun violence of happening to American children, and you were literally killing children.
So he showed some passion there. I think, the gaffes and mixing up names, I think for people who've been observing Joe Biden for a really long time, that's actually just normal Biden. Like, he does mix up names. He was known for gaffes. This is the joke that was always about Joe Biden is that he's the gaffe guy. So I don't know that that is necessary.
Not to that extent. And Joy knows this.
Necessarily going to harm him in some special way. It's the fact that he had the energy, the capacity, and the ability to be normal Joe Biden, if a little more hoarse, if a little bit more, obviously older, just an older version of the Biden that we've sort of gotten used to over the years. It was the abnormality of the Biden in the debate with Donald Trump that threw people off so much. But I will close just by saying the guy that we just saw for the last hour is definitely not someone who is considering leaving the race. He cited the polls showing that there's no data that he's seen that says that he can't win. He was very praiseworthy of Kamala Harris, of Vice President Harris, as he should be, and said some really warm and good things about her. But he also said, even though that he believes that she is clearly qualified to be president, and that's why he chose her, even if someone showed him data that showed that she did better than him, unless he sees data that he can't win, this doesn't sound like a man that's thinking about getting out.
Let's jump ahead here a little bit because I want to get to this next part that Rachel Maddow says here, where she kind of starts to acknowledge that I don't think this was a win for the people. Let me go a little bit forward. And she always has that look on her face too. Like she always has that smug look. I think it's right about here.
Make a really important point, Chris, that I think we can't say frequently enough as Democrats and people who want Donald Trump to be prevented from returning to the White House sort of anguish over this decision, which is that there is not perfect information about the future. And the argument that President Biden is best positioned to beat Donald Trump is an argument. There are other arguments that are also data-based that other people might have a better shot at it. I think that what Nicole points out about the reality about polling numbers for incumbent presidents and the real history of that versus what President Biden said, which was not actually factually accurate as far as I can tell. That's worrying because it makes me worry that the president is being given information about his political standing that may not be based in reality, that may be sunnier than is real. But I also think the president spoke from a factually grounded place throughout his entire remarks. And again, importantly, at the end, what did he say when he got that very sharp question? That's the very closing question from the entire presser when he was asked what he would need to hear to make him decide that the right thing to do for the country would be to leave. He did say in his answer to that, there are other Democrats who can beat Trump too. He said, I believe I am best qualified to govern. I believe I am best positioned, best qualified to beat him. There are other Democrats who could beat him too. And as you said, the reason I would get out is if the data told me, the data showed that I was not going to be able to beat him. Well, no data will ever show that definitively, but him acknowledging that it's not only him who could beat Trump is an important sort of message from the reality-based world.
Yes,
So what I want to say here is that too, like when she said that there isn't going to be data, there probably won't be data that shows that exactly. Right. And he knows that too. That's why Joe Biden knows that too. That's why he made that comment, because he knows that's not likely. Right. Because polls vary and they change over time. That way he can stay in this race. That's what he wants to do. But I'm here to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that you do not have to vote for Joe Biden or Donald Trump. What? You don't. There are other people running outside the duopoly. I recommend you guys, this is the time for you to branch out, to leave the plantation, get off the plantation and just do something bold for once. Yes, they're going to fearmonger you and say you might get Trump. You might get Trump even if those people weren't running. That's the thing that's crazy. So keep that in mind. You can vote for other people. And you may think that third party and independent candidates aren't a threat. If they're not a threat, why is the DNC chair attacking Jill Stein on Twitter? Why are they actively trying to remove third party and independent candidates off of the ballot in certain states? If they're not a threat, if Joe Biden has this in the bag, fam, why is the DNC, the Democratic Party, why are they trying so hard suing these people just for practicing democracy, the same so-called democracy that the Democratic Party claims to care so much about. How about that? Jamie Harrison here. Your campaign is a joke, but you're a national nightmare. My 5-year-old has a greater chance at winning the presidency, and he is constitutionally prohibited. This is Jamie Harrison going after Jill Stein. Now, if the campaign is so much of a joke and your 5-year-old has a better chance of winning, then why the hell are you wasting your time attacking a campaign that's a joke? Why are you, Jamie Harrison, as you are the DNC chair, why are you trying so hard to get these people off the ballot if the campaign is a joke? Because they know that it's a threat. They know that having Jill Stein, RFK Jr., Cornel West, having these people on the ballot, they actually do represent a threat. Everybody knows these people. You didn't know about Jill Stein when she ran in 2016, but everybody knows who she is now. Everyone politically. So why is he doing this? If it's a joke, you see how they're afraid? Now we can go to what she replied to. This is what he got mad about. Jill Stein said, I know, because someone said he's a joke. Jill Stein said, I know, right? So she said, LOL, talk about hitting a sore spot. I missed the part where you denied shilling for Wall Street and war profiteers. By the way, the Senate Intel Committee investigated me for 3 years and found no links to Putin whatsoever. But keep lying to everyone. You are heading the DNC after all. And this is what she's referring to. Oh, did I hit a sore spot? Fair warning. Please understand, I'm not the one. So here we go with the I'm not the one, right? He called her Google Putin's puppet. So he's still running with that same narrative that Jill Stein is like a Putin's puppet or whatever. People will show this picture on social media and say, look, there's Jill Stein at an event with Putin. But they won't show you that Hillary Clinton was also at this event. There's pictures of her as well. Like, it's just, to me, it's a mess. But she said, Google Jamie Harrison, Podesta Group lobbyist for Bank of America, Boeing, BP, Lockheed Martin, Walmart, and Wells Fargo. And he's like, oh, did I hit a sore spot? So then he goes into all of this and is like, your actions help get Trump elected. Typical Democrat Party talking nonsense. Then he goes on to say here, we have seen your nightmare before and are turning the channel. So have a seat. I'm sure Putin has one for you at his table in Moscow, or Donald can find you one in Mar-a-Lago. But I or the nation don't have the time or patience for your bullshit. Jamie Harrison. So again, this is the same guy that I watched run off of the stage after he was approached in the audience by a reparations activist that said, you told us to support these people like Jim Clyburn and Joe Biden. Where's our reparations? He didn't want to answer the question. He ran off the stage. Another bought puppet. That's what Jamie Harrison is. So I'm telling you guys, these campaigns are a threat to the duopoly, and that scares the crap out of them. And that's why the Republican Party tries to get the Libertarian candidates off of the ballot. And that's why the Democratic Party tries to get the Green Party candidates off of the ballot. And it seems like everybody trying to get RFK off of the ballot. But it is just wild and crazy. And that lets you know, ladies and gentlemen, that they are a threat. And you do have other options. Never forget that. Let's go to the comments here. What's up? Thank you for the super chat, Zach, the Celtics guy. How do you afford it in Boston? Sabby. I never really did afford it. Never really did afford it, but I moved. Remember that. I don't live in the city anymore. I moved. So there's that. Thank you, Sparky. McKinsey was a total grift, which got by hiring top students just out of school to BS up a storm and tell CEOs what they wanted to hear even before they were captured by the globalist establishment. That That's where Pete Buttigieg went. He worked for McKinsey. Thank you, Roger. Product G and B from Hempstead, Maria, much better. Maria. You guys want to go listen to Santana now, don't you? Don't you want to go listen to the Santana Supernatural CD? Listen to it as a CD. Santana Supernatural. Shout out to Tufik for gifting 5 Sabby memberships. Thank you so much. Thank you, I Sang. Shout out to I Sang for being a member for 14 months. They did not even mention policies. No, they did not. Thank you, Roger. Joe, to stay in Dems need a major loss. Thank you, Sparky. Maybe Biden was telling the truth and Trump has been his VP all along. And all this never Trump and Trump derangement syndrome is just a smokescreen. Kamala's been just a figurehead VP. It's 5D chess. Thank you, James. Obama's people are behind Biden's demise. However, Biden's not dropping out. Thank you, Blueser. These people are evil. They're seriously sitting up here trying to sell this skit. All of them dead wrong. Thank you, Unemployed Scholar. Biden ASMR. Thanks, Sparky. Sabby, I'll allay your fears because I love you. Remember, Joe Biden is still the most competent person in his administration. Thank you, James. Maddow, Hayes, Reed, Wallace are all actors. You're right, Sabby. I call it political theater. Thanks, Cooper. So the DNC chair is a child. Makes sense. And thank you for this one, James. Jamie Harrison and the DNC are threatened by Jill Stein because she takes votes away from the Democrats when in truth, she brings new people. Thank you so much for that. Let's see that poll, fam. Do you think Kamala should replace Joe Biden? What? Okay, should Kamala replace Joe Biden? We have 1,837 votes. 15% said yes. 27% said no. 47% said I'm voting third party. And 12% said, girl, I have no idea. This is interesting. I'm going to have to take actually, let me take a picture of this, Eric. Don't take it down just yet because I want to share it. Actually, no, I'll take a screenshot of it, not a picture because it'll be blurry like on my phone because I want to show this. I want to share this on social. Oh, no, I wasn't smiling in that one. Hold on. Let's try it again. Yay, I'm smiling in this one. Okay. All right. Based. I got that screenshot. I wanted to, because I'm going to share that tomorrow because I want people to see that. Why can't I save this thing? Oh, here we go. Yeah. Kamala Poe. All right, guys. That is it for me tonight. I am past my time. We will finish the Wisconsin ballot measure results on Sunday. And then FYI, I am traveling all next week. So I will be in Canada. So I will not be live next week. I'll be live Sunday, but then after that, I'll be traveling in Canada. I will still have content that's posted the week that I'm gone. And then also I have 3 interviews that I recorded that will premiere also while I'm gone. One is with Omar Badar. The other one is Professor Morandi came back, so I interviewed him. And then also Sam Husseini. So those interviews will premiere when I'm out, along with other news clips and stuff like that. So I'll catch you guys again on Sunday, right? Yeah. Just like an ocean under the moon. Well, it's a hot one. All right, guys, have a good night. Keep up the fight.